You are listening to the free version of last month's Patreon Party People podcast. If you want to listen to the newest podcasts as soon as they go live, simply visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog and pledge $1 or more. Patreon donors also get custom RSS feeds to download the podcast straight into their favorite listening device. And Patreon isn't just for podcasts. Donating is the best way to show your support for everything I do, whether it's making videos, creating games, producing music, or whatever else strikes your fancy. Just go to patreon.com/blazehedgehog to learn more about the many different ways you can show your support and all of the bonus content you can get. Hello and welcome to the Patreon Party People podcast for, Thursday, January 17th, 2019. I'm, of course, your host, Ryan Bloom, as always, here by myself, as usual. Well, not as usual, but close to usual. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to a new year. Welcome new patrons. Welcome old patrons. Welcome all the rest of you, like the, 80 or 90 or 100 of you that listen on YouTube, or at least start listening on YouTube. Holidays are over. It is a new year. Not necessarily a new me, I don't think. I don't know. Everyone's like, oh, new year, new me. I don't think that's how I roll. I've always been like, I guess you'd call me the stick in the mud. I'm not really sure. We'll say a lot of kids when they're younger, when they're teenagers, they get into role playing a little bit. That's never really been my style. Like when all my friends would do RP, as it were, in the AOL chats when we were 15 and 16 and whatever, I was always like the guy that would just role play as myself because that's how I rolled. So, I'm just me. I will always be me, for better or worse. And you might actually hear my cat outside my closet right now, trying to get my attention because she can't figure out who I'm talking to. Normally, she's used to me talking to her, so she thinks that I'm trying to get her attention when I am not. So you're going to have to forgive me for just a minute. I have to go deal with her. Not anything like rude or anything. I just need to kick her out of my bedroom so that she stops making so much noise. Meow. Ah, there we go. I love my cat, but, she's a cat, which means she's annoying at weird and inopportune times. Obviously, holidays are over. Christmas is over. Christmas came and went. Hopefully all of you out there had a very nice Christmas. I certainly did. This has probably been one of the best Christmases I've had in a really long time. Felt like really good for a change, actually. Obviously, times have been kind of rough for me restabilizing my life after, the move. And, the move obviously causes, every single element of my life to change. And even though that move was, over a year ago, I still get homesick a lot. Probably at least once a week. Just a few days before writing the podcast notes, I was having a dream about being back in my old house, about packing up to move out here to Nevada, about going through all the junk in my bedroom and figuring out what to throw away and what to take with me. But Christmas was a nice opportunity to, forget about all that and just kind of be happy for a little while. Not to say that I'm not happy most days, I guess. But, to be happier, to not really feel like I'm such a stranger in a strange land, I guess. And in terms of gifts, this was an incredible Christmas for me. Probably the best Christmas I've had in at least 10 years, maybe more. Because, everyone we knew back in Colorado was more or less just as broke as we were. So, Christmas was usually, my mom would bake a bunch of cookies for everyone, and that would kind of be our Christmas presents to all our relatives and whatever. And we would, get maybe a few things here and there, a $20 gift card or a game on Steam or whatever. But it was never outrageous, it was very simple, very stress-free, actually, We didn't do much for them. They didn't do very much for us. And that was nice in a way, you know? But since we came out here, obviously, the family is way more tightly knit and not entirely broke. And on top of that, my mom also came into like a small windfall of money. Not very much, but, you know, just a little bit right before Christmas. So it ended up being this situation where it was a generous holiday, let's say, for everyone all around, you know. Up top, like one of the really big things I got for Christmas was a new tablet, which I'm actually reading my notes off of right now. It is a Samsung Galaxy Tab A, which replaces my 3 to 4 year old Asus MemoPad 7 tablet. The Galaxy Tab A isn't like a super top of the line tablet or anything, but it is like a lot nicer than my old one. My old one was getting to be on its last legs. You could definitely feel it. You know, you'd load up the Google Play Store to go update your apps or whatever, and it would kind of like make the tablet too hot to touch, if that makes any sense. And like the store itself would run like really, really slow. I had like storage problems with that tablet too, where like gigabytes and gigabytes of storage space just vanished and I don't know where it went. So, you know, a new tablet, faster, it's nicer, it's bigger, certainly. I think obviously, you know, it's called an Asus, I'm just going to say Asus from now on. It's an Asus MemoPad 7. The 7 doesn't stand for like a version number or anything. It means it is a 7-inch tablet. And I think this Galaxy Tab A is 8 inches, which is bigger. It's a lot brighter and nicer screen for one thing. But it's almost a little too big in a sense. I go back and I hold my Asus tablet and it kind of fits like perfectly in the palm of my hand. It's just that right size where I can just hold it with one hand and it's not a big deal. But this Samsung tablet is right on the edge of maybe being a little too big. But, you know, it's nice to look at. I like it. It's good. And of course, like, my barometer for how powerful these things are is how well they run emulators, right? So there's a Android port of RetroArch, which is an emulator front end that has like all these different kinds of emulators in it. You know, Super Nintendo, NES, PlayStation, Saturn, N64, almost anything you can think of, as long as you know like the slightly tedious, slightly complex way to set it all up, which, you know, some people don't find entirely easy. You know, I don't have a big problem knowing how to set up RetroArch. Or I guess some people say RetroArch. I say RetroArch. That makes more sense because it's like a retro archive, right? Anyway, my barometer for testing out how powerful a tablet is how well it runs emulators. So obviously, you know, I primarily run RetroArch on my desktop. That is where I run PlayStation, N64, that really super powerful Super Nintendo emulator that is like almost 1-to-1 perfectly accurate with real hardware. And on my old Asus tablet, it could run, you know, NES, most Super Nintendo and Genesis games, but it would start struggling with anything more powerful than that. So, you know, it wouldn't really run Game Boy Advance very well. It definitely wouldn't run PlayStation games or anything like that. It kind of would, but there would be like sound problems that, like crackly audio and maybe some frame rate problems. And it would like just obviously just burn through the battery like no one's business. It wasn't really worth it. You know, it was every now and then I'd boot up like an NES game because those are simple enough that they work pretty well on a touch screen. And even just like an NES game, it would chew through the battery in like 2 hours. Like just the whole battery from 100% to 0 in 2 hours. Here, this new Samsung tablet, it actually runs PlayStation games pretty well. And it kind of pairs with my DualShock 4 controller. There is some weird latency problems I'm having to sort of troubleshoot every now and then. I think I've got it squared away. I just needed like a special piece of Bluetooth software to sort of act as an intermediary between the controller and the software. It's weird, I don't know. But it does run PlayStation games pretty well. I've taken to playing Puzzle Fighter on it quite a bit, even without the controller. I started a new game in like Crash Bandicoot on this tablet. It does struggle, it seems, with N64 emulators, but I'm wondering how much of that is just the current state of Nintendo 64 emulation recently. Obviously, like, as far as hardware goes, the more accurate an emulator is, the stronger, more powerful hardware it will require to run that emulator. That is why that 100% perfectly accurate Super Nintendo emulator requires like a 3 gigahertz dual core processor, because it is just super, super, super accurate. So, you know, maybe like N64 emulation accuracy has been evolving by leaps and bounds these last 3 or 4 years. We are well past the point of like crummy old Project 64 or even like Ultra HLE. Like, that is way back in the past. Those emulators aren't really what's the hotness right now. Everyone's using something called MuPen 64 or MuPen, MUPEN 64, through RetroArch. So, you know, the fact that my tablet can't run like Super Mario 64 is a little bit of a bummer. You know, I was hoping it would be a little bit more powerful than that, but it's ultimately not a very big deal because, you know, a lot of N64 games are the kinds that would require a controller and, you know, pairing through Bluetooth and everything like that. It's not necessarily something you're going to do in a car or at a relative's house or, you know, anywhere else where you'd think to pull out a tablet. That's kind of an at-home experience. And if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that on my desktop anyway. So, and, you know, there are other games that I test this tablet with too. I was tweeting about a game called Urban Asphalt, or not even Urban Asphalt. That was its old name way back on the DS. Now it's just called Asphalt 8. That is on Android, iOS, and now PC. My old tablet wouldn't run Asphalt 8 barely at all at the lowest settings. I'd be lucky to get, you know, like 15 frames per second, probably closer to 8 or 10. And now, you know, I'm getting a pretty stable 30 frames per second on the lowest settings. You know, that's still not like outrageously good or anything, but it is at least playable, you know. It's enjoyable. I just don't necessarily know that I like, you know, tilt controls for a racing game or anything like that. You know, it's I don't know. Motion controls are a weird thing that I'm not entirely down with. But the game runs, you know, the game runs a lot better than it did on my old tablet. And like one thing that really surprises me about this tablet is the battery life. Oh my gosh, the battery life on the Samsung Taglet. Oh, a Taglet. Oh, that sounds rude, whatever that is. But the battery life on the Samsung tablet is fairly incredible. You know, I can sit here and play Puzzle Fighter for an hour and it feels like it's only down to 80% battery. It is an incredible machine. I almost wonder if it's like downclocking the processor a little bit. Like if there'd be a way to like unlock the processor, because the tablet never really gets very hot. My old Asus tablet, you know, that thing would get so hot on the back when it was like really churning on a processor kind of thing, that it was almost too hot to hold. And this Samsung tablet never gets hot, ever, at all, for any reason. You might feel a little bit of heat on the back, but it's never an issue, let's say. So there's a part of me that wonders that, you know, maybe there is hidden potential in this tablet to run things even faster, even better, and they're just kind of like capping it so that it doesn't generate too much heat or, you know, drain the battery too quickly or anything like that. But, you know, that's not a big deal. I don't care. It's a good tablet. It'll probably last me quite a while. And it is actually like a top-of-the-line brand new sort of thing, you know. When my mom got me the Asus tablet back in, what was it, 2013, 2014, they were starting to be phased out at stores, if they were even sold at all. I think she ended up getting them for like $100 each, maybe less. So, they weren't really top of the line tablets back then either, and that very clearly showed. I thought, I wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth or anything, because that was my first tablet. But they definitely didn't seem to be very fast when we got them. And these tablets now, she apparently got some kind of like crazy deal on them where she paid, less than half for the pair of them, because she also got herself one. And you can still go like into Walmart or into Best Buy or whatever and find them for sale. Galaxy Tab A's or a recent product, a semi-recent product, let's say. They are still on store shelves. And the versions she got for us normally retail for, well over $200. So, deal or no deal, whatever she paid for them, they are nice-ish tablets. They're a lot nicer than I had. I hate saying like nice-ish. I hate feeling like I have to qualify all this stuff. Like, I'm so ungrateful. That makes me feel actually like tremendously guilty, but they are nice tablets. It isn't, I wouldn't trade this for anything in the world. I'll just shut up now. Before I end up like making this sound even worse. I have such like this really bad way of sounding way too critical about things that I don't mean to sound critical about. I think that's something I need to get better about. Anyway, on top of that, my mom also got me Prisma color markers. You may remember that from my birthday, she got me a set of like 72 Prisma color colored pencils, and those right there are usually pretty expensive. I think they're like a set of 72 or however many colors she got me for my birthday. It's like $150, I think. Prismacolor is like a very top of the line, top name, important, cool, nice brand, let's say, for art supplies. And before Christmas, she was teasing me about something. She said, "Oh, you're going to freak out when you see what I got you. Normally it sells for like $200 to $300. And, I'm thinking, well, what is this? What did she buy me? Did she buy me a Nintendo Switch? Did she buy me a cheap VR headset? What did she get me?" And as it turns out, she got me like a full set, another like 72 Prismacolor markers. And like these are important because a few months ago, like back in April or May or so, I ended up buying myself a set of markers, hoping that, it'd be like a fancy, nice set of markers. I bought them from Michael's, the hobby store, and they didn't really end up turning out to be very good markers. And that's because they weren't the, super fancy, super nice alcohol-based markers, which are the ones that you can use to like blend colors. And, that's what they use, like actual artists use for pictures and things like that they draw or color or whatever. And, I just bought a $15 set of markers, and they weren't blendable, and, they soaked into the page really bad, and they looked kind of terrible, I personally thought. And, at the time I lamented, I wish I had a really nice set of alcohol-based markers. And, you look in Michael's at a set of alcohol-based markers, not even necessarily Prismacolor markers, but just any, like Tebow or, I don't even remember all the brands they have. But, for a set of 5 markers, you're looking at paying like $25 for just 5 markers. So, you kind of have to be, when you buy a set like that, you have to be very selective about the colors you want to buy. And they sell them in sets like that, right? They'll sell you a set of primary colors. They'll sell you a set just of skin tones, because they expect you're only going to buy 5, maybe 10 markers at a time, because they're so super expensive. And, these Prismacolor markers are, like she said, $200, $300 on Amazon. And she apparently knows where to find these things for extremely cheap. It sounded like she paid under $100 for them. And they come in like this really nice fold-out zippered case and everything. I'm really excited to use them on like literally anything, but that would require me to draw something that I'm proud enough of to use the markers on, which is proving to be a little bit more difficult than not. And then from my aunt, again, I don't know how to say words, apparently. From my aunt, I got a DVD player with a surround sound setup. I need to actually, like, look into that a little bit more to see, like, if you have to use the DVD player for the surround sound setup. Because, I wanted to hook it up in the living room where it would be most beneficial to have a surround sound setup. And we already have like a special DVD player out there. It's this DVD VCR combo unit that lets you copy VHS tapes onto a DVD. And, we really don't want to unhook that from the living room. And then, in my bedroom here, I have a Blu-ray player, so I don't really need a DVD in here. So it's one of those things where, I think the DVD player might actually just be a DVD surround sound receiver combo, and I can't actually just plug the speakers into whatever. So I don't know what to do with it if that's the case. I need to like look at the box or find the listing online or something and see everything that's up with this surround sound set. Because I'd really like to have surround sound, that is a nice thing to have, but if it's specifically tied exclusively to this DVD player, then I don't think I can use it, and that's kind of a bummer. But, when she gave it to me, she said that, if I didn't like it, or if I didn't want it, or if I even couldn't use it, she said, sell it on eBay. I wouldn't, like, hurt her feelings or anything like that. So, I just need to look into it. And then from my cousin, I got the Back to the Future trilogy on Blu-ray, which is a set of movies that I've been really wanting for, like, a really, really long time. Back to the Future, the trilogy, those 3 movies, probably like one of my favorite movie series of all time. Like, it's up there with like Jurassic Park, things like that. So, it's one of those things where it feels like I could rewatch it endlessly because there's always, they put so much stuff into the background and there's so many like references to different things. And it's one of those things where it's like you can kind of overthink it if you let yourself. It's not necessarily like they probably didn't think that deeply when they were writing the script or filming the movie or anything, but it's one of those movies where you can really like fall down a really deep fanboy rabbit hole of, thinking about cyclical timelines and, why things in that movie happen the way they do and just little things in the background. Like, one example is obviously Back to the Future 2 involves going from the future back to the past, and Doc Brown kind of meets himself back in 1955. And there's a scene, like, after he meets himself setting up the DeLorean to do the time travel experiment at the end of the movie, where he kind of rides on a bicycle away from himself. Present day Doc Brown rides away from 1955 version Doc Brown. And if you go back and watch Back to the Future 1, there's actually a guy on a bicycle that you can see in the background riding away from that scene in the very first movie. And it's little stuff like that that I really, really love about the Back to the Future series. So yeah, having that on Blu-ray is tremendous. I don't think I've ever actually like owned a physical copy of Back to the Future. It's always been versions that we like taped off of TV or whatever. So this is the first official version of Back to the Future I've ever owned. And it comes with like tons of like bonus extras. There's a whole like 4th DVD with like episodes of the cartoon show, with like new shorts, new behind the scenes interviews, things like that. So, it's a fun time. I really enjoy having that on Blu-ray now. I'm actually going to turn the brightness down on my screen a little bit because it's starting to feel really bright in here. There's no other lights in this closet that are really on, so just staring at this super bright tablet to read my notes is kind of blinding me a little bit. And I guess that was kind of the end of the physical items that I ended up getting from my brother and his wife. They gave me a $100 Amazon gift card, which was then added to by the grandparents-in-law, or whatever you want to call them, my brother's wife's parents, They added another $25 onto that. So I had $125 in Amazon money that I could have spent. And you'd be surprised how far, like, you can stretch $125 when you really want to. I ended up getting stuff like an old, like a pedal machine, I guess you'd call it. Think of it kind of like a tiny little exercise bike that slots under a desk so that you can kind of just, sit at your computer desk and pedal at the same time. It doesn't really like generate electricity or anything like that. But it does like, track calories burned and things like that. I've wanted one for like years and years and years and years. Way back when my grandma was still alive, back in like 2001, 2002, she had one, a pedal machine like that. And when she died, it ended up going to us. And at the time, I put it under my computer desk. And I remember, like, just, I have, like, fidgety legs. If you've seen those people that, like, incessantly bounce their knee, that's me. I'm that person. I have a lot of, I guess, kinetic energy in my legs. I don't know. But once we got that pedal machine, I ended up just pedaling on that all day to sort of, like, instead of bouncing my knee, I just pedal, pedal, pedal. And at some point, I realized one day, I was sitting there like, man, why am I sweating? And I looked down, and I had been pedaling for like an hour straight. So, in terms of like getting maybe a little bit more healthy, having a pedal machine like that is very beneficial to me. So, I used my grandma's old pedal machine until the day it broke, which was like, every day for 2 or 3 years I used that thing. And ever since it broke, like a decade and a half ago, I've wanted another one. And nobody else would ever get me one for Christmas because, who's going to get you like exercise equipment for Christmas, right? That's not what you want for Christmas, even though I'd say, hey, I want this pedal machine. And people would be like, no, I don't think you do. I'd be like, no, I do. But I'd never get it. So having the money, I spent $50 on the pedal machine. And I don't regret it because I've already, in the, 3 weeks I've had it, it's kind of hard to tell how much I've actually used it because I keep also using it as a footrest. So I ended up like bumping the reset button a lot. But, I've probably burned about 2,000 calories, which isn't like tons, That's less than a full day's worth of calories that I've burned. But in terms of, either sitting at the desk completely motionless or burning 2,000 calories over the course of 2 weeks, it's at least like a little bit more than zero, let's say. It's like probably like 100 calories a day, which equals out to like a glass of milk, but still, baby steps. The other day, just yesterday, while I was finishing up writing the notes for my podcast, I actually sat there and I pedaled for like 10 minutes straight. And that's probably the most I've pedaled all at once since I got it. And after I was done, I kind of had like jelly legs for a little while. Not necessarily like, I couldn't walk or anything like that, but, I was feeling a little shaky. So, maybe I'll get fit, maybe I won't. But it's a nice gesture. It helps blood circulation and things like that. It helps you be a little less sedentary. Is that the word? This is the podcast of me not knowing how to say words, apparently. And then on top of that, I ended up ordering another movie on Blu-ray, a couple of them actually. One of them was Redline, the anime movie, on Blu-ray. It's kind of like one of my favorite anime movies of all time. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast before. I probably have, because I really love Redline. The best way to describe it is that it's kind of just like if F-Zero was an anime movie, right? But like cooler than F-Zero could ever be. And it's actually like this really crazy masterclass in animation too. The whole movie, all of it, every second was drawn by hand. And I don't necessarily mean that it was drawn on paper. If you watch like the behind the scenes stuff for Redline, it does show them like drawing on computer screens and stuff like that, but it was still drawn by a hand. And by that, what I mean is that, like, if you don't know anime a lot, modern anime uses shortcuts a lot by using like here we go, can't say it. cell-shaded CGI. 3D models that are made to look sort of like 2D animation, but aren't. It's just a shortcut so that they don't have to hire an artist to draw like a particularly tough scene, right? For Redline, they didn't do that. There was no rotoscoped CGI animation in that movie. Every frame was drawn by a person, by hand. And it took them like 4 or 5 years to put this movie together because it is just absolutely beautiful. Like, you won't find a nicer looking movie. I mean, maybe you will. I don't know. There's a lot of animated movies I haven't seen, let's say. But it is gorgeous. And you should watch it, and you should enjoy it. Because I do. It's not like the most complicated movie in the world or anything like that. Storyline wise, it's pretty simple, let's say. You have your racer guy who has ties to the mafia and he's trying to get out, but he has loans to pay off. So he has to go back in and do one more race so that he can pay the mob boss, the loan shark guy, off. And drama and action and excitement ensues. But that's like a fairly basic premise, but also this is all like in space. You have all these colorful aliens, these weird monsters, these cool futuristic cars. It takes place on a weird planet, like Machine World, I think it's called, or Robo World, or something like that. I think it's Robo World, actually, come to think of it. Machine World is something else. There's a character in the movie called Machine Head. I kind of got the two mixed up. And like people on Robo World don't want the race on their planet, but the people doing the race anyway, they don't care what Robo World wants. They want the race on that planet. So, there's drama from that. And it's a very cool movie. You should check out Redline if you haven't. I highly recommend it. My only regret is the version of the Blu-ray that I got doesn't come with like a digital version. I'm actually getting like really big into having digital versions of movies. Like Ultraviolet, Movies Anywhere, that kind of stuff. Because I'm actually starting, like, thanks to Movies Anywhere, I'm actually starting to amass like quite a library of digital movies. It was the case before where, I'd have like a couple movies on Ultraviolet, I'd have a couple movies on Amazon, I'd have a couple movies on Google Play, and they all kind of lived in these separate ecosystems where none of them ever really like cross-pollinated or anything like that. And now that I have Movies Anywhere kind of consolidates your entire digital library into one. So now I have like 20 movies in Movies Anywhere that I can then play on Google or Amazon or Vudu or whatever. So, that's pretty cool. I'd like to grow my digital streaming movie library a little bit more, if that would be cool. And, it's just also convenient. It's kind of like the convenience of Steam, right? Where you don't have to dig out a disc. You don't have to bother with installing. You just go to the service on like a Roku or a PlayStation or what have you, and you look at your library and you hit play. And there it is. So, I was hoping I would have a version of Redline that would slot into that, but alas, it is stuck on a disc because even though it's this masterclass in animation and all this other stuff, it wasn't really like a breakout success hit. It's kind of an underground movie. That's kind of why I felt like I needed to explain it a little bit more, is because I don't think a lot of people know what Redline is. Like, if you know what Redline is, big props to you. You're in the know. But I don't think a lot of people do. So, go watch Redline. Go tell your friends about Redline. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you won't. I hope you do, because I certainly do. And then the other movie I got on Blu-ray was Ghostbusters 1 and 2. Apparently I had a digital version of Ghostbusters 2 at some point, but I never had Ghostbusters 1, so I ordered like a combo pack on Blu-ray, and that was, again, up there with Back to the Future and Jurassic Park as probably one of my favorite movies of all time, that first Ghostbusters movie. Can't really speak too highly about Ghostbusters 2, though. It's okay, it's kind of a big retread of the first movie, and as long as you go in prepared for that, it's probably not terrible. But, it's not quite the lightning in the bottle that first Ghostbusters movie was. But, I have that on Blu-ray now. That's pretty cool. And, apparently it's a special 4K Blu-ray. I don't know what that means. I don't know, if that looks any better or worse than anything else. But it says mastered in 4K. So, whatever. That's pretty cool. And it came this... It actually, Back to the Future came in this nice, sort of booklet format. I don't even necessarily think it was a booklet format. I think it's cardboard sleeves or something. Ghostbusters comes as a book. Not necessarily a super fancy special edition kind of thing, but it's just, instead of a normal DVD case or I guess a Blu-ray case, it actually has a 20 or 30 page booklet that precedes the 2 discs for the movies actually, about concept art, production notes, publicity photos, things like that, character profiles. It's a nice set, It doesn't seem to have quite the special features that Back to the Future does, but it is a fancy looking product. Let's say, that's just how it is. And even then, those 3 things, I don't even think that was $100 right there. That was probably $80 between those 3 items. So then on top of that, I ended up ordering a wrist rest for my computer because, in the years since I've built my new desk, my wrists have actually started to hurt quite a bit, let's say. And I attribute that to the fact that my old desk, the one that I left behind in Colorado, actually came with a wrist rest built in. It was this big hunk of wood that was part of the keyboard tray. And since I've set up my brand new desk that I bought and paid for myself, it has this tiny little keyboard tray that doesn't have a wrist rest built in. So I figured, maybe I'll just buy my own. And I did. And that was $10. Not really much to say about a wrist rest, except that it rests my wrist. I am a little bit worried about it, though. I ended up looking it up on Amazon because I'm the kind of person, I've gotten into the habit of leaving Amazon reviews on things that I buy on Amazon. And I went back to leave a review for this wrist rest because it's starting to get really dirty really quickly. It's black. It's kind of this memory foam material covered in black fabric. And even though I've only had it maybe a couple weeks, you can already see where my wrist rests. It's got this sort of white strip of dead skin or something, and that's kind of gross. And the fact that it would already start showing that after just 2 weeks of use was going to be something I figured, would be good to bring up in a review. And I went to the page on Amazon where I bought the wrist rest from, and they had deleted all of the reviews. I had bought it because it actually had pretty glowing reviews from 150, 200 people, and going back to leave my review, there was only 1 review left standing. The other, 104 reviews had all been deleted. And then when I click, leave a review, Amazon actually brought up an error message screen saying, "We are not allowing reviews for this product at this time due to suspicious activity," which is, a little bit weird, let's say. So hopefully, this wrist rest isn't, toxic and it will kill me or give me cancer or anything weird like that. You never know these days. There's banned plastics and all this other weird stuff going around that, I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. It all comes from overseas. It's weird. It's cheap. Maybe I should have paid more than $10 for a wrist rest. There were ones on Amazon for, $15, $20, $25 that I could have bought. And I thought, oh, no, this one for $10, it's the cheapest and it has the most reviews. I will buy it. So, I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe my arms will fall off. Maybe they won't. They probably won't. And then on top of that, I got a drawing stylus for my tablet. Not like a fancy like Apple Pencil or anything like that. It's just like a normal stylus, but it's got a fine tip point on the end of it. To, you know, try and make it easier to draw. Because I don't know if, like, any of you out there have ever tried drawing on, like, an Android tablet or anything. You can't really do that with your finger. Your finger is very large. So unless, like, you zoom really in close to where, you know, you can get that fine tip, you're not really going to get straight lines or anything like that. It's very, I found anyway, it's very difficult to draw on like an Android tablet. So I figured, you know, I'll buy like a special fine tip point stylus and we'll see what happens. And it was like $7. So again, you know, maybe should have shopped around a little bit more, because that's to say it's not very good. Like, it works. It does what it says on the tin. It is a fine tip point stylus. And it is made out of like very nice aluminum, and the tip itself is like copper. But guess what your tablet is made out of? It's made out of glass. You might not think about it, but glass is not paper. Paper has like a very specific texture that sort of almost like pushes back against the tip of your pencil, so that, you know, you can get like really fine detail, because you're essentially scratching onto paper. Metal on a tablet screen is like ice skating, basically. So, you know, again, can't really get very straight lines, because, you know, it's easier to have this fine tip for drawing, but it slips around on the screen very, very easily. So, you know, what looks to be a straight line to you, or what feels like a straight line in your brain, does not translate as a straight line on the screen itself. Which is a little bit of a bummer, but I guess, like, understandable. It's a very nice stylus regardless. And it came, like, in a set of 2, so, you know, actually the whole thing was $14, and I ended up giving my mom the extra stylus. And it came with, like, all these replacement tips and everything like that. It's fairly nice. It's like a Meco pencil or something, M-E-K-O. It's on Amazon. I've heard from a friend, a cousin, his wife apparently used to draw on Android a little bit with a stylus like that. And she says, actually, putting a piece of paper over your screen and then drawing on the piece of paper with the stylus will apparently work. So I need to give that a shot, because that sounds like that might actually fix my problem a little bit. I don't know. There's this problem where, like, you know, you kind of need to see the screen. Like, that's the whole point of all of this systems, and like the entire reason you do this is because you want to draw like on paper, but have it be digitally on a screen. But if you put a piece of paper between the stylus and the screen, it's going to be a little bit blurry. So I don't know. Things to mess with at some point in the future, I guess. But for now, that stylus is kind of a bust. And then finally, the very last thing I bought with this $125 Amazon gift card cash, which I was thinking in my mind, cash as in C-A-C-H-E, you know, like a cash, a unit of money, let's say. But it is also cash as in C-A-S-H, whatever. The last thing I bought with this money from Amazon was Dragon Quest Builders for the PlayStation 4. And I haven't really played that yet. Partially because it is currently January 17th. I ordered this stupid thing on December 30th, and it still hasn't been delivered. It was originally scheduled for delivery on like January 4th, then January 15th, or January 4th, January 5th, January 11th, January 14th, I think, January 16th, which is today. It did not get delivered today. It has now been rescheduled to be delivered on January 18th. It will be an entire gosh darn month since I ordered this stupid video game before it actually got delivered to my doorstep. But hopefully it's a fun game. It's a fun video game. You know, I played the demo for Dragon Quest Builders absolutely to death. I must have played that thing for like 4 or 5 hours, and it was just the starting zone. You know, if you don't know what Dragon Quest Builders is, imagine a game that is basically like Minecraft, where you're sort of digging up blocks and using them to build structures and things like that. But unlike Minecraft, Dragon Quest Builders actually has like a proper Dragon Quest story system, or not story system, just a proper Dragon Quest story and a proper Dragon Quest quest system on top of it. It also has a lot better combat. It's kind of like a Zelda game. Sort of like 3D Dot Game Heroes, but not, because you are sort of like tasked with building cities for NPCs to house. So it's kind of like Terraria in that sense. You know, it is Minecraft, but I hesitate to say better than Minecraft, but it is a little more like a traditional video game than Minecraft was. So hopefully that's good. You know, I hear good things. I had lots of fun in that demo. But I guess we'll just have to wait and find out whenever it gets delivered, if it ever gets delivered at all. You know, yeah. But yeah, that was Christmas. There is more that I ended up buying for myself, but we'll talk about that after the break. You know, Steam games and whatever else. Because if you haven't noticed, this is going to be a pretty long podcast because I have a lot to talk about with regards to video games and things that I have played. In terms of everything else about, you know, what's coming up on my YouTube channel and things like that, stuff is definitely in the works. I actually, like, very briefly considered sort of like writing out a whole season of content for my YouTube channel. You know, just like a list of videos that I wanted to do this year. But then I realized that, you know, it takes me like 3 months to put together one video. So, like, the idea of writing out a whole season means writing out like 3 videos, which isn't really something that I want to do. Like, that wouldn't be really very beneficial for anyone. So I decided against it. You know, I have a lot of ideas for videos that I could do this year, that I might not do this year. It's starting to feel like at a certain point, I have more ideas for videos than time to make videos. But we'll see what happens when the future gets here, let's say. Obviously next on the docket is the Sonic Forces video. I hesitate to call it a video review because I don't know if it's going to take the form of a traditional video review, but I have, like, as of about a week ago, started writing out sort of an outline that I want the video to follow. You know, just sort of like point by point, not like super detailed or anything like that, but just sort of getting like a scaffolding of what I want the video to look and sound like, to, you know, what themes I want to tackle, things like that. Hopefully it won't grow out of control, as so easily these videos can grow out of control. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, if I just went back to doing straight video reviews, like, you know, strictly product review videos, they'd probably end up being a lot shorter and a lot easier to produce. But I don't think that's really what people want anymore these days. They want a show, they want information, they want something a little bit meatier than just graphics 4 out of 10 or whatever, right? So, you know, we'll find out what that Sonic Forces video is once it finishes taking shape in my head, but I am going somewhere with it. It is a thought that is on my mind that is being constructed day by day. The more and more I think about it, the more and more it's all starting to line up a little bit, let's say. And then once I'm done with the Sonic Forces video, who knows what I will do after that. Maybe I'll schedule up more videos to produce. I know I said I wanted to do a series of videos on video games you can't buy anymore, video games that are hard to play. You know, and I pitched that as kind of like a shorter series where I wouldn't have, you know, 22, 23, 24, 30-minute videos. It would just be like, you know, quick hits, easily digestible, bite-sized videos. So maybe I'll queue up some of those. Maybe I'll do more videos of music on my YouTube channel. Maybe I'll do that Nights documentary I have rattling around on my Google Docs and in my brain. I've been thinking about that a lot lately too, because Christmas Nights, you know, I'm playing that over the Christmas break. There's that Jurassic Park video that I should probably get around to at some point, because there's gonna be another Jurassic Park movie. They're making Jurassic World 3. So, you know, if I'm gonna strike while some iron is hot, might as well start getting a head start on that. I should do like a little more research on that video. The script is done. Like, you know, I finished that Jurassic Park script last year or the year before, maybe like 2017 or whatever. I don't remember. But I could be a little bit more educated on that. There is some developer history stuff that I still need to maybe clarify, you know, just, you know, covering all the bases, things like that. But I don't know. We'll find out. We'll burn that bridge when we get there, right? That's my famous saying. Maybe I'll just say, you know, screw YouTube videos for a while and I'll go back to working on Overbite. I really should go back to work on Overbite. I started doing some sprites for that a few months ago that felt really good. I'm starting to get that game developer itch back again. I'm starting to get a lot of itches back. That's actually a really terrible thing to say. But by that, I mean the extended break I took. The 2 months off, November and December, and now some of January. You know, that really did, I think I might have mentioned this last month, that really did recharge my batteries quite a lot. You know, feeling the creativity come back, surging back, being eager to work on things again, is a delight and a treat. And speaking of being eager to work on things again and Overbite, if you missed it, I actually released a new version of Overbite a few weeks ago. I think I mentioned it on last month's podcast that I was kind of toying with the idea of doing one last version of the Game Jam version of Overbite, my Dracula comedy stealth platformer game thing. And I ended up doing that a few weeks ago. I finally got to the point where I thought, no, I needed to work on something. You know, obviously I am still in the process of putting together that Sonic Forces video script, but I wanted something a little more immediately creative. So I cracked open ClickTeam Fusion and I fixed a couple of long-standing bugs in Overbite and pushed out a new release. Mainly it was fixing up stuff with the gamepad support. It wasn't entirely working super well with DualShock 4 controllers. There were like a handful of other problems that were happening with that. So I went in and I cleaned those last little problems up and added like a couple new features and everything and pushed that out. And the new features weren't like really anything super dramatic or anything like that. But they are just like little things that I think might make the game a little bit more fun. Things like that, you know. There was like a brief moment where I considered, you know, adding even more large-scale features, because you go back to something like this, something that was rushed so clearly to get it out the door in time for the Game Jam deadline, and there's a lot of bugs in that game. Especially with like the way the artificial intelligence works. So there was this brief moment where I thought, oh, you know, I can go back in and I can fix all these bugs with the artificial intelligence. And the first thing I tried, like, completely ruined the whole game. Nothing would work right anymore. So, you know, I decided, okay, you know, we'll cut back on the bug fixes to just the gamepad stuff. And, you know, a couple of very simple additions. All in all, that bug fix patch, whatever, that I put out, took me about a day and a half to put together. And obviously that wasn't even like a full day and a half. I'd say probably like 6 hours of actual work went into that version. Like 6 hours total over the course of a day and a half. And obviously, you know, that build is up on Patreon. You can go get it from my itch.io. And I do list like the changelog there if you want to know the new features I added, the bugs I fixed, things like that. One of the features I did add, something that I thought would be interesting, is that NPCs react to sound better now. Like, this is one of those things where I don't know if they did this originally, but they do now. If someone, like an NPC, screams, because that's something that can happen in Overbite, if like an NPC catches you doing something evil, like attacking another NPC, or tearing down advertisements, or, you know, breaking stuff, they'll be surprised and they'll run away screaming. So the little bit of new code that I added makes it so that if NPCs hear someone screaming, they'll turn and look in the direction of the scream. And more specifically, they'll turn and look in the direction of Dracula. You know, because, again, that's kind of like this weird workaround thing. Click Team Fusion is bad at object instancing. So, like, I can't make them look at the specific NPC that screamed, because they're all part of the same object instance. So I just make them look at Dracula, because there's a very real chance that if someone is screaming, they're screaming because of Dracula. So making everyone else look at Dracula when there's a scream just kind of makes sense. And, you know, again, it's just one of those little things that sort of makes the world come alive. Now it's a lot easier for there to be like mass panic, right? Because if someone screams and there's other people around to hear the scream, then all of a sudden everyone is screaming. And that's actually pretty funny, I think. That's actually the way it would happen if, you know, something like that happened. It's just, like, this is all weird, like, game developer stuff, real inside baseball, the sort of things that, like, if people overhear you describing in the wrong context, it sounds like the weirdest thing in the world. But it's just, it's fun stuff. I like doing this kind of stuff. Very early on, I learned that when it came to developing software, developing games, or whatever, I really liked messing with artificial intelligence and programming in states like this. You know, just thinking about what a creature would do in a specific scenario, figuring out how to program them to do that naturally. You know, things like that. That's like my real, I guess that's kind of like my bread and butter. Like, you think about like the chat bots I've developed over the years. Maybe a couple of patrons will remember Gilliam, the IRC chat bot that I developed like completely of my own accord. There's this artificial intelligence concept called a Markov chain. I didn't know what a Markov chain was, but I learned how to implement them completely on my own without knowing like that was a known discovered thing. It was just something that seemed totally natural for me as far as like developing artificial intelligence for a chatbot would go. And it's something that I put into an IRC chatbot called Gilliam. And Gilliam was great fun. You know, my friends loved him. He said lots of stupid garbage that, you know, nobody could understand. Kind of like this podcast, really. And, you know, it was really fun programming Gilliam. I really had fun programming artificial intelligence in other video games. You know, there was this really old thing that I developed using Jurassic Park sprites from the Sega Genesis game, where you'd place Dr. Grant in like this maze, right? And the Velociraptor, you'd hit go, and the Velociraptor was completely controlled by artificial intelligence. And the idea was that I would build artificial intelligence for this Velociraptor that would always be able to find Dr. Grant in this maze. And it obviously didn't work very well because, you know, Click Team Fusion isn't really built for that kind of stuff. I didn't really know what I was doing, but that's the kind of stuff that I like to develop, is to figure out these kind of problems, those kind of problems. And Overbite really scratches that itch, I think. And it's one of the reasons why I think Overbite is going to be a very good game whenever I get around to finally releasing the Steam version, because this sort of interactive artificial intelligence, what is the word I'm thinking of here? Community, I guess? I don't know. Like this melange of artificial intelligence characters interacting with each other and figuring out how those interactions should work is extremely my brand, let's say. So, new version of Overbite is out there. There are new features, new bug fixes, and as always, the Steam version of Overbite is coming very soon. I shouldn't have said very soon. It's not coming very soon. We'll be lucky if I even start on it before the end of 2019. Hopefully I'll start it before the end of 2019. I do want to get back to it. I think about it like almost every day, I have so much stuff in that game's design document now of, potential enemy types, potential boss encounters, potential level types, weird secret bonus features I've been developing in secret for the last, 9 or 12 months. All that kind of fun, cool stuff is all going into Overbite, should it ever actually come out. But stay tuned for that somehow, someday, somewhere, eventually. But I guess that's probably about it for upcoming things, Stuff's coming to the YouTube channel, like I said, new version of Overbite. Go download that if you haven't. It is available for free on my Patreon. I did not put that game behind a paywall, because it is not a paid game. If you go to my itch.io page, it is free. It is free on my Patreon too. So if you're listening to this on YouTube and you want to go download the new version of Overbite, there will be a link in the video description. There will be a link on Patreon. There will be 2 links on Patreon, really, because there will be a post for the show notes for this podcast. And then there is the separate individual post for Overbite itself, the 2019 version of Overbite. So go check that out. Go check everything out. Go check me out. I'm going to check out. Here's some break music. We'll come back with what I've been playing right after this. And we're back. For you guys, it's probably been about like 90 seconds, but for me, it's been like a full day. When I took that break last night, it was getting to be around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And after, resting my vocal cords and getting a drink and going to the bathroom and getting something to eat, like an hour, 2 hours had passed. And by then it was getting close to the time that I was going to bed. So, I just went to bed, as you do when it's late at night and you're actually keeping like a semi-normal sleep schedule. Also, I forgot 2 things talking about everything that I got for Christmas. One was something from my brother, bless him. He got me a Funko Pop. My brother kind of doesn't know what to get me for Christmas a lot of the time. And that is both amazing and a little bit weird. But, I kind of like weird sometimes. And what he got me was definitely weird. So not only is it a Funko Pop, everyone thinks, oh, Funko Pops, they're for a very specific subset of people. And generally, I'm one of those people that does not really like Funko Pops very much. But the one that he got me is probably about the most perfect Funko Pop I could have ever hoped for. It is from the Crash Bandicoot series of games. It is Fake Crash. Which, if you don't know who Fake Crash is, I barely know who Fake Crash is. I think there's a part of me that wants to say he's exclusive to the Japanese version of the game. But I don't think that's actually true. He shows up after you finish the game? Is he part of, Crash Bandicoot 3? I don't know if I ever beat Crash Bandicoot 2 either. He's in one of these games, one of those original 3 PlayStation games. He's basically a clone of Crash Bandicoot, but he's ugly. He has buck teeth and big bushy eyebrows, and he is an evil clone of Crash, and getting a Funko Pop that is an evil clone of a person, I really like that. I like how ugly it is, both because it's ugly on purpose and because it's a Funko Pop. So, I'm actually I might sound, again, a little bit down on this, but I'm actually totally into the idea of having a fake Crash Bandicoot Funko Pop. If I only ever have one Funko Pop in my entire life, I am happy it's that one. And then for myself, kind of related to the subject of Funko Pops, maybe you've seen them in Walmarts or GameStops or whatever. These little Pixel Pal guys. It's basically like a little 3 or 4 inch standee. Lights up. It's just like a little piece of pixel art. And they have them for Mario and Mega Man and I think Pac-Man. The one I got, obviously, of course, is Sonic the Hedgehog. And it's this little, very hard plastic, light up standee pixel art thing. And it's actually really cool. I really like it. It cost me about $7. And that's the thing about it, right? I was talking with someone about this. I don't think they were very successful, these Pixel Pal statues or whatever you want to call them, because they originally retailed for $15 or $20, and it really seems like in the last 3 months, places like Best Buy and Target and Amazon are really starting to clearance these things out. I paid $7 for mine, but just since I paid for mine, there are places like Best Buy that are now selling them for $5, and probably even less by now. So if you ever thought, maybe I'd want one of these Pixel Pal guys or whatever, definitely check your local stores, because they probably aren't going to be around very much longer, even though I guess there was at Toy Fair last year, maybe they announced a second series. Apparently they showed a Knuckles and a Tails Pixel Pals that probably aren't coming, or maybe they're coming and they're just trying to clearance out Series 1 to make room for Series 2. I don't know. But either way, they are getting cheap fast. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, by all means, snap them up as quickly as you can. And there's also they light up, right? I said they light up. They take 2 AAA batteries, I believe it is. I'm not entirely sure on the battery life, but there is also apparently a USB adapter out there if you're the kind of crazy person that just wants to have one and leave it turned on forever. I don't think I would ever do that, because it's a fairly bright light. There was a brief period of time where I considered just leaving it turned on in my bedroom at night while I slept. And, it's practically a lamp into itself, let's say. It is incredibly bright. Maybe you saw the pictures I posted on Twitter or whatever, I don't know. But it is a quite bright light. which is cool, but also not especially something that I would just leave on all day, let's say. It needs like a brightness like slider, that would be something that I would be into. Anyway, those are the two things that I forgot about. Something from my brother, the fake Crash Funko Pop and the Sonic the Hedgehog Pixel Pal. And from there, I guess we get on to the usual topic of what I've been playing. And this is where I think, this is, this is where the bulk of the podcast will be. Because in December of 2018, I think I played more video games that month than I did through the entirety of 2018. I played so many video games last month, you guys. You have no idea. So let's get into it right now, particularly with... the reason why I played so many games last month is because of games I was gifted on Steam, or games that I bought for myself on Steam. So, just lots of holiday gaming, as it were. Oh, that's a weird thing to say. Anyway, first up would be Celeste from my cousin Matt. That's a game that's been on a lot of people's Game of the Year lists. And, it's one of those games that I look at and I think, oh yeah, that looks fine. I'm sure people love it for certain reasons, and it never really came up as something that I necessarily would buy. It was something that would just sit on my wish list kind of forever, with the goal of, someday I'd probably end up with it. Because, that's just how games go these days, right? I have nearly 400 games on my Steam wish list, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to buy all 400 of those games. It just means that I probably will eventually end up with those games. Games get given away for free. They end up in humble bundles. As I've said multiple times on this podcast, we are just showered with video games constantly. Free video games or extremely cheap video games. The value of a video game is very low right now. So, Celeste, a game I wanted to play, a game I was not necessarily going to buy brand new, as much as that sounds rude to say, right? So my cousin Matt, knowing how much it was coming up in Game of the Year discussions and things like that, gifted it to me on Steam. And it's a good game. Obviously, I don't even need to tell you that. You've probably heard coverage about Celeste from 100 people at this point. It is a very good game. What I think surprises me the most about Celeste is just how quickly it got difficult. I knew it was a pretty challenging game. I'd seen it on AGDQ and everything like that over the years. Well, over the year, because it is a 2018 release. So, I knew the game was challenging, but I did not expect it to be that challenging that quickly. It's definitely got a very, almost Super Meat Boy vibe to it, with just how tough the platforming is. And part of that is because I'm the kind of crazy person, and I'm maybe this is why they exist in the game. There are these collectibles called strawberries, and they're usually hidden behind really tough platforming challenges. And I guess you don't necessarily get anything for getting all the strawberries. They're just there for crazy people who like collectibles. And for whatever reason, I've been going for every single strawberry I find. And, that'll make a single screen of the game take 5 or 10 minutes of me just jumping for a strawberry and not making it back to a safe platform. Because that's how you collect a strawberry. You can't just touch it and that's it and you have it. Once you collect a strawberry, you actually have to make it back to a safe piece of ground, and then it triggers as collected. So, it is tough to get those strawberries. And I didn't actually learn that those strawberries don't do anything until maybe a day or two ago. It actually brings up a tooltip on screen, and it says, oh, you don't have to get all the strawberries. They don't do anything. They're just there for completionists. And I'm not a completionist. I never have been. I've pretty regularly bragged about only getting up to 80 stars in Super Mario 64. I only really like get 100% in a very, very narrow margin of games I truly care about. And even then, like, there are games that I truly care about that I never even tried to go for 100% in. Like, let's say I really love the original Sonic Adventure. I would never get all 120 emblems in Sonic Adventure. Some of those, like, side activities, the bonus missions are extremely difficult. Particularly annoying are like the Chow Garden emblems you can get. Usually, those are massive, massive, massive time sinks that I would never, ever, ever bother with. There are people out there that really love raising Chow in the Chow Garden, and I am not one of them. I raised 2 Chow back in 1999, and I haven't really thought about it very much since. So, I would never get the full 120, or I guess now with Sonic Adventure DX, it's up to like 150 emblems, I think it is, with the mission mode they added. So, and I tried doing mission mode when Sonic Adventure DX came out in 2004, or I guess I played the PC version in 2005. And those missions are even harder than the other missions. The bonus missions that you can do in levels, like, finish within a certain length of time or whatever, those missions. It's weird. Like, that's the confusing thing about Sonic Adventure DX, is there's like 2 different tiers of submissions, and one of them is attached to the levels in the level select menu, and the other one is attached to this mission mode, and it is just a weird mess. Regardless, again, never would 100% that game. I think out of the 250 or 300 Xbox 360 games I own, I've only done like 100% full clear on like 4 or 5 of them. And that's because that was like really easy to get all the achievements, right? So it was like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Sonic the Fighters, Nights into Dreams, Doritos Dash of Destruction, which, I don't particularly love that game, but it was easy to get the full clear on the achievements. And then I don't know what the 5th game would be. But it was something easy, I guarantee that. So, what was I talking about? I was talking about Celeste. I was talking about getting strawberries in Celeste. I'm not a completionist. So, I've kind of stopped trying to go for strawberries, but at the same time, that game is still really difficult. So there's been like one of the things Celeste contains is something called assist mode. And assist mode, let me read my notes here. How did I have it written down? Assist mode is full of options to help people through the game that might be struggling for one reason or another. It's kind of titled assist mode because I would assume, at the very least, that it's for people with, like, disabilities, right? People who get frustrated easily, people who might have mobility issues that prevent them from pulling off the insanely difficult inputs this game requires, people who maybe are too young or not dexterous enough, the elderly maybe, I don't know. So it's one of those things where, like, I could turn on assist mode. I know that assist mode doesn't penalize you at all for turning it on or turning any of its features on. Some of it is like unlimited health, slowing the game speed down so that it's easier to do the inputs. One of the things, the unique mechanics in Celeste, is having this 8-way air dash, and you can turn assist mode on to where you can have like double the air dashes or even infinite air dashes. Normally you only have one air dash before you have to touch the ground and recharge. So you can get infinite air dashes, you can turn the speed down, you can get infinite health. You can even like straight up skip levels if they're too hard for you. You can just dump out to the map and say, okay, I want to skip this world and go on to the next. And it will totally let you do that. So it's one of those things where, like, if I'm having trouble with the game, I could turn on assist mode, but it would also make me feel bad. The example I give here in my notes is that it's kind of like taking a mobility scooter in like a supermarket, even when you don't need one. Like, yeah, it would probably be pretty cool to drive around in a store in this little motorized scooter, but what if someone else needs that? You can't just have a joyride in those kinds of accessibility features, I guess you'd call it, if that makes any sense. But then again, it's kind of like if the developers think that it's more important for you to finish their game than to actually play it a so-called quote-unquote correct way, right? Going back to like the mobility scooter example, if someone just gave you a free wheelchair, like no strings attached, of course you'd take the wheelchair just to have like dumb fun on a wheelchair, right? So I don't know. It's one of those things where it's sort of preventing me from playing the game a little bit more, because I don't know if I want to turn on assist mode or not. It would feel cheap, but it's also there to help, and if I'm struggling, then I need the help. But also, I feel like I'm pretty good at platformers, I'm not the worst at platformers at any rate. Very recently, it's not here in my notes as a game I played this month. Not that this is a platformer or anything, but I finished the original Doom on Ultra Violence mode, which is that game's hard mode, and I actually found it to be not super difficult. There were choke points definitely in Doom where I was getting frustrated, and then I kind of backed off from the game for a little while, for like an hour or two, came back to it, and I conquered the challenge. So it wasn't really that difficult for me to finish Doom on hard mode. And it's one of those things where, I can power through difficult games if I want to, but at the same time, Celeste is hard. It is one of the harder games I've played in a while. So I don't know, like this is what the inside of my brain looks like. Is constantly wrestling with like, am I good enough? Does it matter if I'm good enough? Should I turn on this assist mode? Because like the whole thing used to be way back in the day, I used to default all games to easy. I used to use cheat codes religiously. And I was terrible at video games for the longest time. I didn't really know how to play them the proper way or anything like that. I probably told this on the podcast before. The famous examples is that I would use a Game Genie to cheat through games like Earthbound or Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy II or whatever, RPGs like that. Typically very easy games that you can just grind past all of the challenge if you don't want to really buckle down and face a difficult boss or anything like that. And it led to this point where, like, in 2005, when Resident Evil 4 came out, I bought that game for the GameCube, hearing, like, all the glowing reviews everyone had for that game, and I bounced off of it super hard because I didn't understand how to play it. None of its systems really made sense to me. It was a little too difficult for me. It was just, like, this very sort of insurmountable challenge for me. I didn't necessarily hate Resident Evil 4, but I didn't exactly love it either. And that's, I think, because it was a difficult game for me. And from 2005 to 2011 or whatever, I made a concerted effort to get better at video games. I stopped playing on easy mode. I really started to dig into the mechanics of how video games work. And in 2011, when it came time for me to produce my Mario Kart 8 video review, I had a lot of free time on my hands. And what this meant, had all this time to transcode video because of the way I produced video reviews back then. It meant having 2, 3, 4, 5 days of not being able to use my computer because I was transcoding the video I'd captured from one format to another so that I could edit it in Sony Vegas. So I had all this free time where I couldn't work on the video review, I couldn't use my computer to play games or watch YouTube or anything like that, because it was just, churning on transcoding video. So during this time, I picked Resident Evil 4 back up, and, in the 6 or 7 years that I'd been, forcing myself to get better at video games, it really paid off. I went back to Resident Evil 4 and suddenly, everything clicked. I knew what the systems were. I knew how to play the game because I'd built up that knowledge of being better at harder video games. And I feel like that continues to pay off even now. Like I said, I beat Doom, the original Doom from 1993, on its hard mode, not the hardest mode. Nightmare mode is for crazy people. It's super cheap. The monsters respawn. It's not very fun. I think when you start Nightmare mode in Doom, it actually tells you that it's not supposed to be something that you finish. Ultra Violence is the hard mode that you're supposed to be able to finish. And I finished it. Well, I finished most of it. Doom originally shipped with 3 episodes, and then later they released a 4th chapter, a 4th episode called Inferno, and Inferno is 10 times more difficult than the base campaign. So I haven't beat Inferno in Doom in Ultra Violence mode. Not yet, at any rate. I do plan on trying again sometime in the future. But my point is, I'm better at video games now, and it's kind of a sticking point for me to be better at video games, because it's something I try to do. So the idea of using assist mode in Celeste feels a little cheap for me. I shouldn't need the assistance, I guess. But if it's there, maybe I should use it. So I don't know. That's Celeste. I will definitely go back to Celeste more in the future. I'm probably about on chapter 2 or 3 at this point. So yeah, Celeste. Gosh, and every time I look up at my tablet screen to read my notes, it feels so blindingly bright. Because for most of this podcast, I'm actually staring into this completely pitch black microphone box. And it kind of normalizes my eyes to where I can actually see the sound dampening foam inside the box. And then I glance up at my notes at my tablet, and it hurts my eyes. Oh my gosh. And I don't even have the brightness turned up that high. I'm going to turn it all the way down to its lowest setting. And even that feels a little too bright. So what was after Celeste? It probably doesn't count, but I was gifted a copy of Sonic Lost World on the PC. Humble had a Sonic bundle last month. And Sonic Lost World was the only Sonic game on PC that I didn't own on Steam yet. So, I kind of put a call out on Twitter a little bit saying that, if anyone has an extra key. I don't even think I said if anyone has an extra key. I think I just said it was the only Sonic game on Steam I didn't own yet. And a friend who I think might be a patron, I'm not entirely sure, just kind of dropped the key in my lap one day and said, here's Sonic Lost World for you. Enjoy. And I couldn't help it. The curiosity got the better of me again. So I ended up reinstalling it. Or not even reinstalling it. I just ended up installing it. Obviously, I had that game back on the Wii U. I produced a video review for it. Half of which was immediately invalidated when Sega actually put out a patch for Sonic Lost World that fixed up some of its bugs. But that certainly didn't fix the whole game now, did it? I'm not even gonna talk at length about Sonic Lost World. In essence, if you want to see what I had to say about the PC version of Sonic Lost World, I wrote a Steam user review for it, and I'll link that in the show notes. It's a pretty long review, especially by Steam user review standards. I usually try and keep my Steam user reviews to maybe around 3 paragraphs, because that's not a system that's really built for good long form in-depth reviews. So, I try and keep my Steam reviews short, but obviously when it comes to Sonic games, once I open my mouth, it is incredibly difficult for me to shut it. So I ended up writing a really long Steam user review. You can go read that if you're interested. I will save you the time on this podcast. Otherwise, it'll be another 10-15 minutes of me just going, "Oh, Sonic Lost World! Oh, that game sucks!" And you know what? It sucks. The PC version sucks a lot more, too. The game is just a mess, and it only gets like messier every time I touch it. It's weird. After that was 2 games, Antichamber and Megaton Rainfall from Setsune, who is a friend and fellow patron, has also guested on this podcast, which, I mean, technically also my cousin who gifted me a Celeste also has guested on this podcast. Antichamber is one of those games that, like, I saw a Giant Bomb quick look for it, like, many, many years ago, and I thought, that game looks cool, and then I put it on my Steam wish list, and I kind of forgot about it. It would come up on like Steam Gifts a lot, and if you don't know what Steam Gifts is, it's a website where people give away excess Steam keys they might have, just for free. Like you put your name into a hat, and then your name gets drawn from the hat, and maybe you get the game or not. And every time it would come up on Steam Gifts, you know, I'd enter to win it. But it was one of those games, kind of like what Celeste was going to become, where I put it on my wish list and I don't really buy it. It just sits there and I think, man, that game looks cool, and then I don't do anything with it. Because for whatever reason, it just never comes up into a scenario where I'd personally consider buying it with my own money. Because I'm weird and I almost said miserly, but to be miserly, you have to have money, and I don't really have a lot of money. But you know, it's just a lot of games that have come out and are coming out, and sometimes you put those games on your Steam wish list and they just sit there for no good reason. Like, you know, they'd be enjoyable games to play, but you just, whatever reason, it never happens to where you buy them. And you know what? I kind of regret not really buying Antichamber. It is a cool game. If you've never heard of Antichamber, the most basic way to explain it is that it's kind of like a Portal-like game. It's first person. You've kind of got like the test chamber format, and there's a series of puzzles. But that's kind of where the similarities with Portal end. Because Antichamber is like a completely different beast. I think Antichamber was the game that kind of introduced the internet to the term, hopefully I'm going to say this properly, non-Euclidean geometry, which is to say, Doctor Who fans would know, it's kind of like how the TARDIS is bigger on the inside than yes, the TARDIS is a person now. I actually think the TARDIS is supposed to be a woman, isn't it? Anyway, digressions. It's like how the TARDIS is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. On the outside, the TARDIS just looks like a phone booth. On the inside, it's this giant spaceship that is impossible to exist in this tiny little phone booth. That is sort of what non-Euclidean geometry means. It is basically a catch-all term for impossible space. It's the kind of thing that's probably like not really possible to describe just over like radio or whatever. Imagine that, like, so if you turn left 4 times, you go in a circle, right? You end up right back where you started. For non-Euclidean geometry, if you turn left 4 times, you might end up in a completely different location. That's probably, that and like the TARDIS description is probably the best way I could describe this strictly through audio. It's the kind of thing that you really need to see to believe. And even then, I guess the game like really confuses some people because of this, because, you know, you'll go up a flight of stairs and suddenly you're under something, or you'll jump down a hole and you'll end up in a room to your left, right? It's very weird. It, like, again, that's kind of the Portal thing, right? Where you open a portal and you walk through and you end up somewhere that isn't directly beside you, I guess. If that, I don't know. I feel like I'm just making this worse by trying to describe it honestly. But it's a puzzle game that deals with this concept of non-Euclidean geometry, of impossible space, of, you know, trying to figure your way out through this maze and get to the end of the level. And, like, not even necessarily to the end of the level, because this doesn't really have levels. It's literally just a big impossible space maze. And you'll run across, like, paintings that give you clues or hints or whatever information about the current puzzle you're facing. And it's up to you to decide where to go next, basically. which puzzles are the puzzles you want to solve that will take you to the end of the maze. And it is a very weird game. It kind of feels like an intelligence test in a lot of ways. Just to see, you know, how you'd handle the idea of impossible space, I guess. Because, you know, it's all this like reality warping stuff. And it's the kind of thing that feels like it's only complex if you make it complex. I don't know, like, if this really plays to anyone out there. But it's like how some people get really confused by the idea of time travel, right? Like, I feel like that's a common theme in time travel stories, where you have the one guy who's like, oh, hey, wait a minute, what? I don't understand how time travel works. And it's like, I've never had that problem. You know, you move from one point in time back to another point in time, sort of like pushing the rewind button on a VCR, and it's not very difficult to understand. In the same way, I don't think Antichamber is very difficult to understand. As long as you're not totally glued to the concept of physical space, it makes sense in a way. You know, you learn that if you go down this hallway and you turn to the left, then you end up in point B. And maybe point B doesn't make sense in terms of spatial reality, but it makes sense in terms of the idea that you go down the hall and you turn to the left or whatever. Like, does that make any sense to anyone at all? I don't know. It makes sense to me. I've got a grasp on the video game. And like, it especially feels like an intelligence test. Because I feel like, if I remember properly, one of the very first things you see when you boot up the game is it's pointing you at a whiteboard with a timer counting down. The whole game, like, it doesn't matter if time runs out, but you are being timed. I think you have about 90 minutes to find your way to the end of the maze. And I think it's probably like a given that you're not going to find your way to the end of the maze in 90 minutes. But it's the whole thing is painted like it's this test of how you handle spatial reality. And I think, as of the last time I played it, number one, I ran out of time. That's how I know, like, the clock doesn't matter. If you run out of time, you can still keep playing the game. And number two, I think I left off shortly after getting to the halfway point. Because, like, the thing about Antichamber is, it seems like it shows you the exit multiple times. And I'm not entirely sure if you can just take the exit whenever you want, like whenever you run across it. Obviously, there is a door that will open that is marked exit, and you reach this door multiple times throughout your journey. And the second time I encountered the door, I accidentally, like, rubbed up against it a little bit to where the door swung open. And the entire reason I know that I made it to the halfway point is that when the exit door opened, it showed like a glass of water that was half full. And I take that to mean that was the game's halfway point. And obviously, you know, if it took me like 2 or 3 hours to get to that point, assumedly all the puzzles to follow that point are going to be like considerably more difficult. So, you know, that's just how it be. Antichamber is a cool game if you haven't played it. I definitely recommend it. It is unlike anything else out there. Like, even in the context of it sort of being like a Portal video game, it is completely unlike Portal in almost every single regard. Which, of course, brings us to that other game, Megaton Rainfall. This was a game that I saw come through Steam Greenlight like many, many years ago, like 2, 3, 4 years ago. And I figured it was going to be rejected from Steam Greenlight because it seemed very weird, like inscrutable. Not like Antichamber is inscrutable, but just the screenshots didn't really make very much sense to me. The screenshots they had on like their Steam Greenlight page or whatever have like all these visual filters on them, like all this motion blur, all this distance blur. They looked very faked, especially because you couldn't really see like a player avatar or a HUD or anything. It was just like this generic looking cityscape with all this motion blur and like a UFO. And I think one of the screenshots was like a nuclear bomb going off. None of it really looked like it made a ton of sense. And I don't remember what the description was, like the text for it or whatever. But I just remember thinking that, it looked like nonsense. And then it got pushed through Steam Greenlight, and it was like, oh, well, great. Greenlight is worthless. And it ended up on Steam for sale. And user reviews began pouring in for this Megaton Rainfall video game on Steam. And they were all like glowing. Like everyone loved this game. And it was like, what is this game? I don't understand it. I don't understand what I'm looking at. And on that basis alone, I threw it on my Steam wishlist. And it was one of those things where like, when I'd go through and clean up my Steam wishlist, I came real close, like a couple times, to taking Megaton Rainfall off because I still didn't really get what the game was. But I figured, no, we'll see this through. One day I'll own a copy of Megaton Rainfall, and I'll figure out what the hell this game is. And as it turned out, then I got gifted it for Christmas, and I figured out what this game is. The key point that I was missing in these screenshots is that Megaton Rainfall is a first-person game. The entire reason there wasn't any player avatars on screen is because you're looking through the eyes of your player avatar. And actually going back and looking at the screenshots that are currently up on Steam now, which I think might actually be different screenshots than what were originally on the store page when it was on Steam Greenlight and everything. But looking at it now, like the thing that I missed is that you can actually see like arms and legs in the screenshots. Suggesting, sort of like a body presence. You're like this, they're like semi-translucent, and I guess they've like added a VR mode recently. But like the big thing is actually playing Megaton Rainfall to figure out what this game actually plays like. And the other key piece of information is that Megaton Rainfall is like a Superman simulator. You play as like some sort of alien being that was sent, I don't know, from space or something. I think there might actually be like some of the like early story setup might like say that you used to be a human or something, and now you've like ascended to this superhero status or whatever. But you are this weird alien being. You can kind of see through your arms and legs like you're this being of energy or something like that. But you are a Superman. You're like a superhero, and you've been sent to protect Earth. And like, I think what really makes Megaton Rainfall interesting is that it kind of solves the problem of how do you make a Superman game? This is something that many developers over the last, 30 years have wrestled with. Because Superman is this character who's kind of the best at everything. That's his gimmick. He's faster than everything. He's stronger than everything. He cannot really be harmed by anything. He never ages, he never dies, except for that one time, maybe twice. But, he is Omega. He is almost like, like a god or something, I guess, if you want to really get trite about it. So how do you make a game about Superman? How do you make the player play as Superman? And over the years, different developers have tried different things. Superman 64 just gave you like a straight up health meter. EA made a Superman Returns game for the Xbox 360 that didn't give Superman a health meter at all. It made the city into a health meter, and that was kind of interesting, but also kind of worthless in a way. Because again, nothing can really hurt Superman, and modern video games aren't very good about like putting the tax to the player, if that makes any sense at all. So the way Megaton Rainfall handles this... the example I wanted to give about what you do about Superman. NetherRealm has obviously made, like, 2 Injustice games at this point, and their explanation is that, like, other characters take, like, Superman pills to make them super strong, like Superman. And then, I guess, like, movies and stuff have said, Superman is powerful, but he's not that powerful. He's not, like, invincible, which... okay, fair enough. The way Megaton Rainfall handles this is that it says that, like, the most difficult part about being Superman is trying really hard not to mess up. It's like trying to keep your strength under control, trying not to cause like massive collateral damage, things like that. Like, apparently Superman's greatest struggle is not accidentally killing hundreds or even thousands of people. That's what Megaton Rainfall has to say. And it's kind of a premise that DC themselves would probably never go for, right? Because Superman is also a brand. You can't show that Superman is that dangerous because he's supposed to be likable. He's supposed to be like the king of all superheroes or whatever, right? So they'd never really go for a Superman game where you could kill the entire population of planet Earth. But Megaton Rainfall, not being a legitimate Superman game, but more of a Superman game in spirit, they are much more willing to let you just make mistake after mistake after mistake, apparently. So the whole game is about defending planet Earth from these UFOs, from an alien invasion, right? And they come to Earth in like a variety of different generic UFOs. Each one looks unique, has a unique weakness, a unique attack pattern, and it's up to you to sort of figure out how to deal with each unique UFO that comes down. And early on, probably like the second mission, the first mission, the game teaches you how to fly, and then it gives you your first attack, which is sort of like this dinky little fireball sort of thing. The second mission it gives you a new ability called the Gigaton Blast, which is kind of like a charge shot for your fireball, right? You know, you instead of tapping the mouse button to shoot your fireball, you hold it down, charge up this beam, and then you let it all rip. And the game tells you that anything caught in this beam will be instantly vaporized, but that, you know, to keep it balanced, the Megaton Blast is on like this big cooldown, right? So it tells me, oh, you know, new UFOs are attacking a city halfway across the Earth. Fly over there and stop them. So I've got this new Gigaton Blast toy to play with, and, you know, I'm kind of itching to see what it can do. So I blast off, I fly all the way around the Earth, from like the dark side of the Earth to the light side of the Earth. Maybe I'm in like France or something. I don't know. But UFOs are attacking. So I fly up on this city. I'm like 300, 400, 500 feet in the air. The UFO's below me. I charge up my Gigaton Blast, and I shoot a beam out that kind of looks like Goku's Kamehameha. Oh boy, did I just say Kamehameha? Kamehameha. Kamehameha is what it was called in the old Saban dub. Oh my gosh, I can't believe. Apparently that information is still rattling around in my brain somewhere. Anyway, you shoot this Dragon Ball Z beam down at the UFO, or I did at the very least. And just like it said, it vaporized the UFO into dust on contact instantly. It is an instant death kill attack. Emphasis on the kill, because the beam keeps going after it hits the UFO, and it slams into the street below the UFO, and immediately a tooltip pops up. This tooltip says, hint, only fire the Gigaton Blast upwards or you could destroy the entire city. So I didn't fire the Gigaton Blast straight up, I fired it down at the street, and it just hit the street. There's this big, like, bright flash of light, this huge explosion, and this shockwave goes rolling through the city. It's knocking down skyscrapers, there's people screaming, smoke and debris everywhere. It is a national disaster. And the game starts popping up with these little, like, messages. 25 casualties, 50 casualties, 125 casualties, 300 casualties, 500 casualties, 700 casualties. And sort of like Superman Returns on the Xbox 360, the city itself has a health meter. And every time it pops up one of these casualty reports, the health meter drops. And drops, and drops, and drops, until it's 0. And when it hits 0, game over. Good job, you totally caused like a Man of Steel event. Which, if you don't know, at the end of Man of Steel, Superman basically accidentally destroys an entire city. And in the context of that movie, they kind of just brush it off like it's nothing. Nobody ever like says, oh, Superman, what have you done? It's just kind of like this thing that he did that looks so epic. But in the context of Megaton Rainfall, pulling a Man of Steel is a game over. And I thought that was a pretty cool, like, learning moment. That was, that you can just totally nuke a whole city if you're an idiot. And that kind of becomes like the primary struggle in the game, right? Not only do the UFOs have like new attack patterns, but the way they move around is specifically as such so that they're kind of hard to hit, so that it's sort of almost like encouraging in collateral damage in a sense. You're shooting, you have to be like very careful with your shots to not like destroy buildings, to not blow up cars, and like specifically also you don't want the UFOs to do any of that either. So it's this very like precise video game. You have to be very like surgical with your movements and your attacks in a way that I find super interesting. It is such a cool way to show Superman, to say, here's this character who is stronger than everything, and that strength is actually a big problem. That is what is so cool about Megaton Rainfall. It's probably not like that long of a video game. I think there's probably only about 16 levels, which a single level is only like a couple minutes long. But at the end of every level, they give you a new power. Usually that power ties into a new type of UFO you're going to fight in the next mission. And even if like the game itself is super short, it does at least like play with scale a lot. That was another thing that really impressed me with Megaton Rainfall. Obviously, you're flying around the Earth, like around the Earth itself. There are no like level transitions or anything like that. It is a physical planet that you must fly around from city to city to city. And not only does it model like planet Earth, but eventually, I think by the third or fourth mission, you get the ability to do interplanetary travel. You get to fly out into space and kind of look for these monuments that are out there as kind of like a completionist sort of thing. And it's just like the scale of it all feels like really, really cool. And it's one of those games where like I bet in VR, this feels incredible. But obviously that scale comes at kind of a cost. Even if it was just Planet Earth that they did, I don't think like they would have been able to manage very much detail. Because like I said, this is a $15 game on Steam. So it's not going to be like No Man's Sky. It's not even really going to be like Spore or anything like that, where you have like detailed cities or like really good automatic algorithmic generation of locations. All the cities kind of feel a little bit samey, but they do like try to make each one feel unique. One of the first places you go when you start the game is, I think, Dubai, and you know that it's Dubai because there's certain like patterns on the beach. I don't know if you've ever seen like aerial photos of Dubai, but they have like artificial islands in Dubai that the rich people have made for themselves that are like specific shapes. So if you're flying around Dubai, there are like specific landmarks that you'll be able to point out. And I've also, through the course of playing Megaton Rainfall, there were missions that took me to like Stonehenge. I think there was one mission in Seattle because it had like the arch or whatever. One of the last missions I played, I was obviously flying around the Empire State Building. So even if like all the cities look nearly identical, regardless of whether you're in the desert or wherever, they do at least try to put landmarks in to spice things up, to make it look like a different place. But it is, obviously they are working with a budget. And like the other weird thing about this game is its storyline. It starts out very sort of Superman-y, how Superman sort of has like these visions of his father through his pod or whatever. That was like a big element of the original Superman movies, the Christopher Reeve movies. You kind of had like the floating space head or whatever. That's kind of represented here in Megaton Rainfall, but eventually it gets to like these really sort of deep theological questions about like the nature of the creation of the universe and your role in the creation of the universe. And it suggests that, maybe you're like this celestial being. It's like, it talks about the branches of the tree of life and branches on branches and like alternate realities. And it all gets a little over my head. And it feels like it's written in such a way that it's supposed to get over my head. It's kind of almost written in like this poetic way that's very deliberately hard to follow. And like, that's kind of annoying, but it's also kind of cool in a sense. It really gives the game this sort of weird flavor that I kind of dig. So, like I said, that's Megaton Rainfall, $15 on Steam. I think I'd probably recommend it, if only for like the opening 2 or 3 missions. Maybe like the first 5. I forget where I left off. I'm on like mission 9 of, again, like I said, like 16. So I'm probably right around about halfway through the game. It's something that I really need to go back to. Actually, I've been thinking about it like the last 2 or 3 days as something I want to finish off here soon, just to see where that weird storyline goes, because I've heard it goes in some weird places towards the end. So again, we've been talking here quite a while, probably about, I don't know, if I had to guess, 30, 45 minutes. It's time for another break. When we come back, we'll talk about games that I wasn't gifted from friends, games that I bought for myself for Christmas and have been playing. So, see you guys after this second break. And we're back from our second break. And by us, I mean me. I say this, we are back. Yes, it's the royal we. Before we went on break, I was talking about the games that other people gifted me on Steam. Celeste, Megaton Rainfall, Antichamber, Sonic Lost World for the PC. And now we're going to talk about games that I just straight up bought for myself this Christmas. I did mention that, past Christmases back in Colorado or whatever were usually pretty light, pretty relaxed. Nobody really got each other very much stuff. So usually, I'd buy myself some stuff if I had some money. It's not like a big deal or anything. That's just how it goes. Christmas is a time for celebration. So is New Year's and whatever else. So I just end up usually buying myself a couple of games on Steam or whatever. Also it's like Christmas sales, right? That's kind of what they're there for. The only problem is that, like, I bought myself a bunch of games and there's only, like, really 1 or 2 I've actually played so far. I've been playing games from other people more than I have been playing the games that I bought for myself. Pretty much the only game that I've really sunk my teeth into that I bought for myself was Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Was it Ritual? No, it's Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. Ritual of the Night is the Kickstarter game. Curse of the Moon is the 8-bit demake, sort of prequel game or whatever you want to call it, by Inti Creates. It's not necessarily a Koji Igarashi joint, I don't think. I mean, I'm sure he worked on it, but it's not, the main Bloodstained game. If Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is riffing on Castlevania Symphony of the Night, then Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is riffing on Castlevania 3 for the NES. What this means is that it's kind of like a straightforward linear action game. It's not really of the Metroidvania style of which Ritual of the Night will be. It is just, level by level, straightforward action. And if you've ever played Castlevania 3, that is exactly what Curse of the Moon is like. Is it Curse of the Moon? Yes, it's Curse of the Moon. I always have to double check because there was Circle of the Moon for Castlevania on the Game Boy Advance. See, it's kind of overlapping a little bit. You'd think they would have picked a more unique name for this. Anyway, Curse of the Moon, like I said, linear action game based on Castlevania 3. Castlevania 3's big gimmick, if you never played it very much, you can... Castlevania 3 is probably one of the hardest of the classic Castlevanias. So you'd be forgiven if you never really knew that this was a mechanic in it. But if you get far enough into Castlevania 3, you can recruit one of 3 partner characters. There's Grant Dynasty, there's Alucard, and there's Sypha, which is this kind of witch lady. And you can only recruit one at a time, and in Castlevania 3, if you push the select button, you'll flip between either Trevor Belmont or the partner character. And partner characters have unique abilities, unique sub-weapons, things like that. Curse of the Moon here actually adapts that system pretty directly, but with 1 or 2 new twists. The big new twist in Curse of the Moon is that instead of just having one partner character, now you can build up a whole party of 4 characters. So you don't just have the main, he doesn't really use a whip in Curse of the Moon, he uses a sword, but instead of just having one at a time, you can also recruit Muriel from Ritual of the Night. I think her name's Muriel, something like that. There's a wizard guy, and then there's their Alucard stand-in guy. And you can have all 4 of these characters at once, and you can switch between any of the 4, kind of like in Sonic Heroes, really, where you just hit a shoulder button and you flip between one of the 4. And it's pretty fun, but it's not really super terribly unique. It has nice sprites, it has nice chiptune music. It's all very much kind of a known quantity. You can't really talk about it in too many platitudes, I find, because it's saying that it's rote feels like an insult it doesn't deserve, but it is a little rote. It's a little predictable, let's say, which is fine. We haven't had a classic Castlevania like that in a while. You'd say not from Konami, but this isn't really from Konami. This is from a guy who used to work at Konami and his team of middleware managers or something like that. I don't know. But it is just, it might be predictable, it might be rote, but it is enjoyable. It's done well. It's fun. It has good music. It's just, none of it is really a surprise, I guess. But I've always been a big proponent that games don't always have to be a surprise. Sometimes just straight down the middle, right across the plate is exactly what you need and is exactly what you're looking for. There are a lot of games out there that try way too hard to reinvent the wheel. In particular, I always think of Final Fantasy in that regard. Modern Final Fantasy is nothing like what anyone used to really like about those old Final Fantasy games. The battle systems are completely different. The styles, the eras, everything about them. Modern Final Fantasy is miles and miles away from what really defined that series, I find. And a lot of Final Fantasy games, not to go off on this tangent on Final Fantasy in the middle of talking about Curse of the Moon or whatever, but it feels like Final Fantasy got into this problem where not only did it reinvent the wheel, it reinvented its own wheel, Or, like, you know, they reinvented the wheel, and then they reinvented that wheel, and then they reinvented that wheel over and over and over and over and over again, to the point where it's just like, what even is a Final Fantasy game anymore? You know, you think about Final Fantasy 15, and it's this weird, generic, kind of boring action game. It's not really what Final Fantasy was. Not even in the context of what, like, Final Fantasy was on the PS2, or, you know, not even necessarily like what Final Fantasy was on the PS3, you know? It feels like, just, I've complained enough about Final Fantasy in the middle of this, Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon discussion. But really, that's because I can't really talk about Curse of the Moon, you know? I've said everything you need to know. Do you like classic Castlevania? Do you remember Rondo of Blood? Do you remember Castlevania 3? Because it has a lot of stuff from those games in there, and it does them well enough to be enjoyable. Enjoyable enough that I think, gosh, I don't remember what I paid for it on sale. It was probably like $5, maybe $7. I think it normally retails for like $15 or $20. It's probably still worth it even then. You know, worth checking out, I guess. And like I said, that's kind of it as far as games that I bought for myself. I bought like 4 or 5 more games from the Steam sale that I just haven't really gotten around to installing or looking at or playing yet. I have a list of games here. I got Trick Style for $1, which is this hoverboard racing game on the Dreamcast from Criterion. They did the Burnout games, you may know. I got Super Cloud Built for $1. I think Fanatical was having a build-your-own bundle deal, and basically, you know, if you picked just one game, you got it for $1. And I've heard, you know, a few people over the years recommend Cloud Built to me. I think Super Cloud Built is basically just like their Game of the Year edition or their Gold edition or whatever that comes with like DLC or something. I'm not actually sure, but I'm sure it'll be probably a fun game. It's kind of like this speedrun based platformer that kind of has elements of like a Sonic game, the way you're kind of like boosting through the air and everything. I got something called Shootout on Cash Island for like 50 cents because I had just money in my Steam wallet from selling cards, and it was like the last day of the sale. And, you know, part of how you get those cards for the Steam winter sale is you go through your queue, and you know, they show you games that they think you might be interested in, or like usually they just show you random games, right? It's not necessarily anything you're specifically interested in. And one of the games that came up on my queue was this thing called Shootout on Cash Island. And it's this like super basic indie game, but it kind of reminded me of Broforce from the video that I saw. So based on that alone, I added it to my wish list because I knew it was cheap. You know, hardly anything is worth 50 cents. I mean, you know, and by that I mean, even if it wasn't on sale, even if I didn't have 50 cents in my wallet, you know, technically making the game quote unquote free, I still probably would have bought it eventually, just because it's so cheap, you know. Almost, what I meant to say earlier, almost anything is worth 50 cents. And then on GOG, I finally bought Jazz Jackrabbit 1 and 2. Those are games that I've pirated over the years, kind of, like, not really pirated in so many words, like, I never really, like, sought out torrents or anything like that. There used to be a version of Jazz Jackrabbit Holiday Hair, like, 94 or 95 I had on some, like, cover disc at one point that just came with the whole game. And that's, you know, it shouldn't have come with the whole game. That kind of thing is sort of like a form of piracy. Holiday Hair was specifically supposed to be shareware, a demo that stands by itself, and for whatever reason, this one just came with the whole game. So, you know, for free was what I'm saying. So, you know, I paid for Jazz Jackrabbit 1 finally, and then many, many years ago, Home of the Underdogs, an abandonware site, used to host a version of Jazz Jackrabbit 2, that was later discovered to be like a weird prototype version of the game that wasn't like entirely finished. Some level tiles were broken. Some levels were broken. I think I remember ended up hitting a level that wasn't entirely finished and showing a friend who's like a big Jazz Jackrabbit 2 fan, being like, hey, check this out. Is this supposed to be like this? And he was like, what? Where'd you get this version of the game, dude? And I told him, it came from Home of the Underdogs or whatever. And he was like, wow, that's weird. This is like a prototype version that, nobody ever really knew existed until now. And, he kind of acted like I was the one that discovered it, even though, obviously it came from this abandonware site, this like fairly famous abandonware site. If you've never heard of Home of the Underdogs, be sure to go check that out. If it's still around. I mean, I haven't been there in quite a while, but, now I own Jazz Jackrabbit 2. I'll finally be able to, give that a fair shake. Because, 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was just, maybe early 2018, late 2017, I ended up playing through most of Jazz Jackrabbit 1, but I haven't touched or even really thought about Jazz Jackrabbit 2 since that beta version that I got off of that abandonware site or anything, So, that's one of those things where it's like, I would totally play that, I should play that. It's just I haven't gotten around to it yet, That's just how it be with games you buy sometimes. And then finally, we have 2 more games that I ended up buying. One, Target was having a fire sale on 3DS games. Some really big heavy hitters for $5. And unfortunately, most of them sold out before I could get there. And I could have driven to our Target, but that was our Target is 15 miles away. And at the time, we had just been in the middle of a snowstorm. So it wasn't really an option for me to go out into the streets and drive 15 miles to a Target, given that, it was probably fairly dangerous to do so. So, my plan, hearing that there were all these cheap 3DS games, I had wanted to buy Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, a replacement copy for Super Mario 3D Land, because I own that game on cartridge. It's just the cartridge has a bent pin, and it doesn't work right most of the time now. I 100% full cleared Super Mario 3D Land when I got my 3DS back in 2012. And, it worked fine then. And then 2 or 3 years ago, I tried to put my cartridge back in because, I was getting a hankering to replay Super Mario 3D Land a little bit. And about halfway through playing one level, it popped up that it lost signal to the cartridge and to take the cartridge out and put it back in. And ever since then, the game almost barely works anymore. I'll be lucky to get, again, maybe 5-10 minutes into a game, and all of a sudden it'll pop up that, data is corrupted or whatever. That cartridge is just toast. It was used when I got it. There's these little plastic teeth on the back of the cartridge that tell, I don't know, the system where to read data from or whatever. And one of those teeth is kind of broken a little bit. You can kind of lift it up and move it around, and apparently that's interfering with how it reads data because that game just doesn't work anymore. So, with this Target sale, I was planning on replacing that because I've been in a Super Mario 3D Land mood. As you may have noticed from my YouTube channel, I put up a video of me playing an emulated version of Super Mario 3D Land in 1080p. On the Citra emulator, but even then, I was still willing to buy a fresh, brand new cartridge. So, Luigi's Mansion 2, Super Mario 3D Land, and then the third game I was going to get was The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. I was planning on spending $15 on 3 3DS games, and when I got to the website, Luigi's Mansion was sold out, Super Mario 3D Land was sold out. All they had was A Link Between Worlds, so I ended up spending $4.99 plus $4 or $5 shipping for A Link Between Worlds. And I haven't started that yet either. I'm not even sure that my 3DS is charged right now. And part of that reason is I've been also playing something else. You'll notice, a month or 2 ago, I said I was kind of done with Final Fantasy VI. I got up to the final boss and I kind of petered out. It's a very long boss, and if you fail at any point of it, you basically restart at the very beginning of the boss. So, I kind of fell off of that game and never finished it. And I was thinking about, all the things I could play now that I was done with Final Fantasy VI. I could have played Undertale, I could have played Mother 3, I could have played Breath of Fire, I could have played all kinds of different games, and what I settled on was a ROM hack called Pokemon Ultraviolet. And Pokemon Ultraviolet is a version of Pokemon Fire Red that basically eliminates the need to trade with other versions of the game. So it has all 151 Pokemon right there on the cartridge without needing to trade or do any shenanigans or anything like that. For example, also, at certain points of that game where you can get a fossil and you have to choose one Pokemon over the other one, well, now you get both of those fossilized Pokemon. There are places where you can find all 3 starters. There are places where, just all kinds of other weird, little changes and features where you can get all 151 Pokemon without needing to trade or anything else like that. And I've been sort of enjoying that. It's, I am the kind of crazy person that thinks the original 151 is probably the best Pokemon ever was. I'm not really against Gold and Silver and Crystal, but as we get into the later Pokemon games, that's kind of where I really lose interest hard. I fully realize that makes me one of those crazy people, and I'm fully okay with being one of those crazy people. I have a lot of myriad complaints about Pokemon. I'm not going to get into them here. I mean, you don't really need me to go on for another hour just talking about, old man yells at cloud kind of stuff. So we'll just leave it at that. Even going back to Fire Red and Leaf Green through this Ultraviolet hack, there are things about it that are a little hard to swallow. Not to say that they're exclusive to Fire Red and Leaf Green. Most of my problems with the Pokemon franchise in general are just, problems that are in every game, let's say. And it's one of those things where I'm curious if, Sun or Moon addresses my problems, because a lot of the stuff that I don't like about this franchise is how little it changes from game to game to game. They just kind of add more complexity without really addressing existing issues. And I'm already getting into it. I'm stopping here. We're ending this conversation about Pokemon games. And I'll stop saying it like I'm a PR person saying Pokemon. Most people say Pokemon, But for some reason, at some point in my life, I got really into saying it Pokemon, like they do on the TV commercials. I'm sure Nintendo would love me if they knew that I said it the way they do in press releases. I guess this could count as a game I got for Christmas, but since I have a new tablet, that means trying out new mobile games. You may know that I fell off of mobile games pretty hard. I used to play Dragon Ball Z, Dokkan Battle, Final Fantasy Record Keeper, 2 or 3 more, just on and off every now and then. And I got bored with them all. I don't think mobile games are really for me, but, new tablet, I get to kick the tires and try things out and see what's up. And that includes trying Sonic Forces Speed Battle. And the main reason I wanted to try Sonic Forces Speed Battle is because, I see a lot of people on Twitter and social media, people I follow that are like, oh, this is my favorite Sonic mobile game. It's really cool. So I wanted to give it a whirl. I wanted to see what was up because the people who made Sonic Forces Speed Battle have made other Sonic mobile games. They made Sonic Jump, and they most notably made Sonic Dash. And Sonic Dash is a game that I will never, ever stop pissing on, I guess you could say. I really do not like Sonic Dash. It is a very shallow, very shrewd game that exists only really to make you bored enough to spend money. Okay, that's the basic gist of how I feel about Sonic Dash. And Sonic Force's speed battle is basically Sonic Dash 3. So, I wanted to give it a shot, see if the problems I had with Sonic Dash, the original, were fixed or not, if it was any better, and I can safely say that I think Sonic Force's speed battle sucks. Oh boy. Get ready for a really long rant about this game, folks. I think this is the only thing left in my script. Not script, but my notes. Now, to be fair to Sonic Force's speed battle, it does address some of my complaints that I had for Sonic Dash. One of the complaints I had about Sonic Dash is that, the whole goal of that game is to collect all of the characters. So you start with Sonic, and then you can unlock, Tails and Amy Rose and Cream the Rabbit, Espio, the whole usual suspects. But when you do that, none of them are different at all. All of them play exactly like Sonic does. So essentially, in Sonic Dash, you grind and grind and grind and grind to unlock a character that is basically Sonic at level 1. And you have a Sonic that is at level 30 or 40 or 50. So why on earth would you ever play as Tails unless you got bored of being too powerful as Sonic? And frankly speaking, Sonic never really felt very powerful in Sonic Dash anyway. So this is something that Sonic Force's speed battle addresses. Every character in speed battle is noticeably different. Characters have different stats, they have different abilities, they play visibly different from each other. Good thing has been done. Thumbs up. And the other thing that I didn't like about Sonic Dash is that there was no environment variety, right? You were always in Green Hill Zone, always, 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 always. It never changed. There was never anywhere else to go. It was just always that one level. And Sonic Force's speed battle introduces multiple environment types. It introduces multiple level types. It introduces levels with different kinds of difficulty, different kinds of elements. It is a lot more varietous, if that's a word. That's a word I just made up, varietous. It means having variety. Put it in the dictionary, Webster. And like I said about Sonic Dash, it took a lot of grinding to unlock any of the other characters, right? So I think I played Sonic Dash for about a week, maybe 2, and it took me that long just to unlock Tails, or, whoever the second character was. I feel like it was actually Cream the Rabbit that I unlocked second. I don't know. Anyway, it took me a long time to unlock just one character, because you had to, store up a lot of resources to get there. And like I said, once you unlock that character, they were identical to Sonic in every way. They just had slightly different animations, maybe slightly different sound effects, but by and large, they were exactly like Sonic. And in Sonic Force's speed battle, surprisingly, it is much easier to unlock people. Instead of grinding out one character at a time, now you kind of multitask and unlock groups of characters pretty quickly. Essentially, there's an experience points system, and to unlock a character, you need to grind them up to, level 1. Once you have them at level 1, then you can play as them. And, this ends up giving you a lot more characters a lot more quickly, and by and large, that's better than what Sonic Dash was doing. But, it's still a mobile game. You might only have to level them up to level 1 to unlock them, but you're still, greatly encouraged to either spend money or, grind the heck out of everything forever. Essentially, the only way to earn experience points in Sonic Force's speed battle is to get them out of loot boxes. And when you get experience points out of a loot box, it goes to a random character. You don't get to control who gets the experience points from a loot box. So you might finish a race, get a loot box, and get 10 experience points to unlock, I don't know, Vector the Crocodile. And to unlock Vector to use to get him, up to level 1 or whatever, he needs 300 experience points. And you just gave him 10 experience points. And that 10 experience points might be all the experience he ever gets that week, because everything else, all the other loot boxes you open throughout the week, give you experience for other characters. Because there's like 20 or 30 characters in Sonic Forces Speed Battle. So as you can imagine, it is easy to unlock characters, but incredibly difficult to unlock characters specifically. Like, you cannot aim to unlock Shadow the Hedgehog or Vector the Crocodile or Big the Cat. It just kind of happens of its own accord. And, you can, if you want, just buy these characters from the store directly. If you don't want to bother with this whole weird unlock system, they just have packs of characters on the store for $7.99. Otherwise, you're just kind of swimming in a lot of useless characters you don't want to use. And, in some weird way, that might actually be kind of tolerable. I've said this before in my Sonic Runners retrospective review I wrote a couple years ago when Sonic Runners got shut down. Loot boxes aren't the worst thing. Loot boxes are only terrible when they're forced upon you. When people force you to pay for a loot box, that is when they are bad. But on their own, strictly as like a gameplay mechanic that doesn't have any monetary value tied to it, loot boxes have been this thing in, RPGs and even like tabletop games for years and years and years and years, and nobody's ever really complained about them then. It's only when you use them in the context of it feeling like gambling that it becomes an issue. So, Sonic Forces Speed Battle does kind of shower you with loot boxes. Free loot boxes that you don't even have to pay for. So, if it was just that, it might be fine-ish. It would be less of a problem. It would still be pretty annoying, but it would be the kind of annoying that would be at least a little bit tolerable. But the big hook of Sonic Forces Speed Battle, like the whole thing that everything is based around, the entire reason you'd want to unlock all of these characters and care about all their different stats and abilities and things like that, is because Sonic Forces Speed Battle is a multiplayer game, exclusively multiplayer. There is no offline mode for this game. You are always being matched against other players on the internet. And, obviously the biggest problem with that would be latency. If this was like, I assume at any rate, if this was like a fully connected internet multiplayer game, that would probably chew through the battery pretty quickly. And, like I said, this tablet has amazing battery life and whatever else, so maybe I'm wrong about that too, but, it would be hard to do a legitimate multiplayer game on a tablet like this. And, I'm fully aware that there's like a version of Fortnite out there, there's a version of PUBG, multiplayer, online multiplayer mobile games are becoming more and more and more of a thing that people can do and enjoy and whatever. But the problem with Sonic Forces Speed Battle is that it is really, I hesitate to say the word lazy, but it is really relaxed in how it handles its multiplayer internet connection, let's say. And what this really means is that, like, lag is a big problem in this game. I have a really good connection here at home. I get like a 9 millisecond ping because we live right across the street from the ISP office, their, what do you want to call it? Like tech support office or whatever. That is literally, I could walk there and be there in like 5 or 10 minutes. It is that far away. So we have a really like very nice ping, 9 milliseconds. We get like 110 megabytes down, or megabits, I should say, and then like 15 or 20 megabits up. So we have a pretty good connection here in this apartment. And the number of people in Sonic Forces Speed Battle that I see like teleporting around the track or whatever else makes it like basically unplayable, I'd say. You can't ever like get a bead on someone to use a weapon on them, and even if you like fire your missile at them or whatever, and it'll look like a direct hit or whatever. It'll just kind of phase through them like they're invincible. That is my experience with Sonic Forces Speed Battle online, as it were, is that it is a competitive game where you can't hit anyone because, like, they're the ones that are probably, like, lagging super bad because they're using mobile data instead of Wi-Fi or whatever else. And it basically just turns this into a nightmare because you can't ever guarantee that you're going to be able to hit anyone with anything. And this is very much a multiplayer game, kind of in the Mario Kart style, in a sense, which is like the next nightmare in Sonic Forces Speed Battle, which is, so, Mario Kart has item boxes. Usually there's like a set of 2 or 3 or 4 item boxes per lap, let's say. In Sonic Forces Speed Battle, those item boxes are every other turn. And what this translates to is everyone spamming weapons all the time, constantly. Especially because you can hold up to 3 items at the same time. That's kind of where, like, the unique abilities come in from other characters. So you have, like, base stats for your character, which is, like, top speed, acceleration, and a stat called strength. I'm not entirely sure what strength does. It might, like, pertain to your recovery time for when you get struck by an attack or something. But then each character has 3 different abilities, and those abilities are what you get out of the item boxes. So, for example, if you're playing as Classic Sonic, you get the ability to shoot out a Moto Bug as your missile. You get an invincibility power-up like you get in the Classic Sonic games or whatever. You get like sparkly stars that swirl around you, and then you get a row of bombs. It's like spike bombs, I think, or something. And if you play as Tails, for your missile attack, you get like a whirlwind. For your row of bombs attack, you get like this fan system or something that kind of like steals items or something, I'm not sure. And then he'll get like some other kind of boost or shield or something. And that's kind of how like the structure goes. Every character has a missile, every character has a wall of bombs, and every character has like a boost or a shield or something. And by wall of bombs, I mean like something that forces you to jump. Like if you've ever played an Endless Runner, there will be pits or spike bombs or, something you have to jump over. And that's what these wall of bomb attacks in Sonic Forces Speed Battle are. And, that would be well and good, except that also, like, I question this game's balance a lot. Earlier I said there's like 20 or 30 characters in this game, and I'm not necessarily sure that it's completely balanced. I was looking through my characters, and I realized that I have some that have, like, nearly identical stats. What do I wrote here? For example, I have Espio the Chameleon unlocked, and Wave the Swallow. Both of them have nearly identical stats, except that Wave the Swallow, I think, is a little bit faster than Espio, by, like, 1 point. So, why would I ever use Espio, right? Obviously, Espio has slightly different abilities. Maybe he makes up for that. Maybe that 1 point in speed or whatever is made up for with him having really good abilities or whatever. But again, all the abilities are kind of like genericized to where everyone has some variant on the same 3 abilities. So, not necessarily, I don't think that's necessarily super balanced. And you run into this problem where some characters seem to be, clearly better than others. Obviously, you have characters rated by, like, rarity and whatever, and I think, the more rarer a character, the better they're probably supposed to be. And not even necessarily that, but, like, some characters seem to be built specifically just to be annoying, right? So you have Vector the Crocodile, right? His bomb wall ability, or whatever you want to call it, is a row of chewing gum. And if you step in the chewing gum, it covers your screen in bubbles, and you can't use any items until you pop all the bubbles, which means, tapping on your screen until it goes away. that gives him, I would say, a very clear advantage over everyone else in the game because, you know, a lot of those other bomb wall abilities don't really lock you out of your item bar like that. And that's like the problem with Vector, is that while you're popping these bubbles, you can't use any of your weapons even if you pick them up. Rouge the Bat, her bomb wall creates like fake item boxes, and if you touch one, it locks your item bar until you pay rings to unlock the slots, so that you can use your weapons again. Amy Rose has probably one of the most annoying abilities in the entire game, which is this lightning bolt. When you get struck by lightning in this game, not only does it make you stop moving for a little bit, it steals one of your items, and in particular, Amy Rose's lightning bolt ability doesn't need to be like specifically targeted at anyone. So if you use her lightning bolt ability, it targets a random racer in the battle and will just shock them. It doesn't need to be aimed. It doesn't need to be anything. You just tap the button and someone gets screwed over. So, you know, it's the balance of this game feels all out of whack to me in a way that just isn't very fun. Obviously, you know, a lot of these things can be avoided. There are tricks to get around certain weapons, certain items. But it just, I'm not having very much fun with it so far. And like the controls, that's like a big part of why I'm not having fun with this, is because the controls. It is exclusively a touch-focused game. It doesn't even recognize like controller support or anything like that. Not that you necessarily would want it, I guess. Like, it's not a direct control sort of game. In true like Sonic Dash fashion, you swipe left and right to change lanes. And, you know, most of the time that's okay. But as you start like moving up the ranks and getting to harder and harder levels or whatever, they start introducing tracks that don't just have the standard 3 or 4 lanes. Now you'll start running into tracks that have like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 lanes. And that really becomes a problem when they expect you to like swipe across 3 different lanes on a tight turn. And it takes like actual physical time to swipe your finger across the screen. At least on my tablet it does. And, you know, having to move across 3 lanes of traffic in about 3 seconds, not even 3 seconds, like less than that, like 2 seconds or 1 second or whatever, is just kind of impossible. You know, there will be times where I'm trying to avoid something and I'm swiping across my screen as fast as I possibly can, and it's just not, it just doesn't work, you know. So, you know, first you have this, you know, the crummy loot boxes, you have the bad balance, you have the latency, the lag problems. You can't control who you level up, when you level them up, why you level them up. It is just, it's such like not a fun game for me to play at all. I don't understand how anyone like likes this game or likes this series of games. It is like the worst elements of a mobile game, the worst elements of an endless runner, the worst elements of past games in this series. And that's not even touching on like the advertising or anything else, right? Like most mobile games, this game shoves like video advertisements down your throat constantly. You'll have an option to watch ads before you open loot boxes. You'll have ads to double your winnings after certain races. You'll automatically watch ads after you finish some races, even if you didn't choose to watch an ad. It is just, And like, if you watch too many video advertisements in this game, it eventually causes a memory leak and the game will eventually crash. Like, videos themselves will eventually start like loading black screens or like flickering, and if you don't like quit and restart the game, eventually like the textures will become corrupted. It is just a mess. It feels so gross to think about these games. Like I said earlier, I'm not a mobile game person, I don't think. And I'm definitely not the kind of person who enjoys these Sonic Dash games. They're like glorified carnival games, you know? The kind that are like rigged so that you can't win them. The deck is stacked against you from the start, and it's just not even fun, you know? It sucks. You're just throwing your money away. You're throwing your time away. It's an incredibly rote, endless runner paired with a frustrating multiplayer gimmick, and it all exists to distract you with your favorite characters just long enough so that you watch 3 more video ads. And, you know, I need to uninstall this game before it drives me crazy. Like, this is what got me to stop playing the original Sonic Dash, was getting into, like, this cycle of playing the game even though I hated it, because that's what mobile games do to you. They get you into, like, cycles of habit. I'm sure some of you out there know the term Skinner box. It's about, like, a rat in a maze or whatever. I don't know. But it's all, like... I don't want to sound like I have a tinfoil hat on, but it's just all like psychological tricks to keep you playing even though you don't want to keep playing. And I don't think that's so much of a tinfoil hat thing to say, actually. It's just a fact of how mobile games work. And I feel like I'm specifically trying to resist falling into those traps. And when I notice those traps, it pisses me off. Probably more than anything. So maybe you're cool with it. Maybe you like Sonic Dash. Maybe you think, you know, jingling your favorite keys in front of your face is, you know, all you need from a game, but I'd like to have more than just an excuse to give them advertising money, I guess. So I really need to uninstall it. I probably won't, you know. I wrote these notes like 4 days ago, and I wrote that line in there that I need to uninstall the game, and I have played Sonic Forces Speed Battle like 6 times today, to the point where, like, I've actually noticed they put a limit on how many loot boxes you can open, because they're running an event right now where, you know, you can unlock, like, the Christmas and Halloween characters that you might have missed. And if you play it enough, if you win enough races, eventually it will tell you that you've run into the limit of the number of loot boxes you can open for the day. And that's another crummy mobile game thing. Excuse me, this podcast has been going on a long time and my throat is getting sore. To get off of Sonic Forces Speed Battle, we could just talk about 2 more games real quick. I'll try and make it fast because, you know, this is going to be like a 3-hour podcast at this point. Awesome Games Done Quick just ended a few days ago, and they had like a Serious Sam co-op run that really got me in the mood to like play a Serious Sam game. And I've played that first Serious Sam game, the first encounter, probably like 6 or 7 times at this point. I've played Serious Sam the second encounter, really didn't like it, never finished it, don't want to ever finish it. I played and finished Serious Sam 3 a few years ago. There's a video of that on my YouTube channel of the last level of that game. And then I realized I've never actually played Serious Sam 2. And my advice to you is to never play Serious Sam 2 because that game sucks. It is like the logical endpoint for that era where I think Crow Team was trying to make Serious Sam into like a funny franchise, and I put funny in like scare quotes. The sense of humor in that game I would charitably describe as being like sub-Earthworm Jim. The part I keep coming back to and describing to people is coming across like a fishing hut on a dock somewhere, and just sitting on a table in the middle of this fishing hut is a bowl of baked beans. And if you walk up to the baked beans and you press the use key, the fishing hut explodes like a bomb went off, and the game proudly declares, "Farting secret has been found." And at that point, I think I rolled my eyes so hard, I almost broke something. And that's not even like the worst of it. Like, that's actually a pretty tame joke by the standards of Serious Sam 2. About 20 feet away from the farting hut is a bush where 2 aliens are going at it, having sex in the bush. And if you walk up to the bush and you press the use key, it'll tell you, "Sexy bush secret has been found." Ugh. And, oh my gosh, what else? Like, it's also, like, slightly racist in a way. you spend like a lot of time in that game around like indigenous tribes of aliens. And by that, I mean like stereotypical indigenous people. We're talking like mud huts, face paint, loincloths, the whole 9 yards. And they're the kind of thing where like these aliens are supposed to be, they're supposed to be funny and wacky and haha funny. They're not racist because they have blue skin, but like one of them wears like a Flava Flav clock around his neck. They all have like really big lips and really big noses. And it's one of those things where you could just tweak the hue slider just a little bit so their skin wasn't blue anymore. And they would be like super offensive racist, right? The only thing that kind of stops them from being racist is the fact that they're supposed to have blue skin. And if that's the only thing stopping you from not being racist, I have bad news for you. That means you're racist. And the game is like sexist too. So from the very first Serious Sam game, you had kind of like this computer lady with you. She was called Netriska. And in the very first Serious Sam game, the Serious Sam the First encounter, she doesn't really talk. She doesn't really have dialogue. She's kind of just more like a codex, right? You'll be playing the game normally and it will say like, press F1 for more information about this enemy type. Press F1 for more information about the environment you're in. It's very basic, like bestiary codex information about enemies and locations and weapons. For Serious Sam 2, they kind of wanted to make her sort of like that game's Cortana. So now she has like voiced dialogue lines. She has like this portrait where she's like a sexy lady with a pixie haircut. And the worst part of it, like I could swallow giving Netriska, dialogue, making her look more human, whatever else. But for like lack of a better term, they kind of turn her into a bimbo. More than once, she leads you directly into a trap because she is like distracted by something pretty or doesn't notice that it's an obvious trap. There is at one point, she's like, oh, look over there. There's like a member of the indigenous alien tribe for this level. You should go help them out. And from like a mile away, it's obvious to tell that it's a puppet. It's not really one of the aliens. And it speaks with like this crummy robot voice. And I think even Serious Sam himself says something like, oh, this feels like a trap. But, Netriska says, go check it out. Go see what they want. Go give them help, Sam. Go be their hero. And obviously, it turns out to be a hero. And she's made to look like a stupid woman, in other words. And that exact same scene happens again somewhere else in the game. You run inside like this laboratory or something, or like these ruins, and there's like this sparkly portal on the ceiling, and she's like, ooh, how pretty, go check it out. And they give Serious Sam this awful line like, women, am I right, you guys? And it's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing, Serious Sam 2? You're making women look like idiots. You're trying to turn Serious Sam himself into like some kind of even worse version of Duke Nukem. Like, there's this whole thing where like Serious Sam was always kind of a riff on Duke Nukem, but like leaning into it is not how you're supposed to, like, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. And then, as if it wasn't bad enough to make Netriska look like an idiot constantly, they also have these moments where like after a big battle she'll like slather you with unnecessary praise, like telling you what like a big, strong, manly, awesome person you are, just over and over and over again. And Sam's like, yeah, I guess I am pretty cool. It's like, no, nope, I don't think so. Nope, you're bad. I'm bailing out. Goodbye. I'm jumping into space. And it's also not very fun to play either. Like, that's also the other thing. Like, I'm willing to put up with a lot of Duke Nukem because I think Duke Nukem 3D is a very fun video game to play. Obviously, I don't agree with the game's views on women, but, that's a different discussion entirely. But Serious Sam 2 isn't fun. It's bad. It's from that era where Halo 2, or just Halo in general, the Halo franchise, was taking the world by storm, right? Oh, shooters on the console, they finally work. Halo figured it out, you guys. And Serious Sam 2 was on the Xbox, which is where Halo was. So a lot of Serious Sam 2 feels like it's trying to be Halo. Not even necessarily the fact that they tried to turn Netriska into that game's Cortana, but there's like pointless vehicle sections. You have like a special button just to huck grenades. The menus feel a lot like a console game. They scaled back a lot of like the really big armies. Serious Sam is kind of a game known for having, these ridiculous huge battles or whatever. And at least in the hour or so I played Serious Sam 2, the numbers of enemies didn't really get up to like typical Serious Sam levels for me. It was a lot of like single file enemies, spawn 2 or 3 guys in at a time, which, gets kind of boring after a while because, you're not really, there's just not the polish there that was in that very first Serious Sam game. And turning it into Halo doesn't really work either. Like, all the vehicles suck to drive, the weapons aren't as creative, the jokes aren't very funny. Things like it's a crummy game, like just through and through. It is nothing that made that first Serious Sam game cool. And it's one of those things where you think, like, I don't think Crow Team can trap that lightning in a bottle ever again. Serious Sam 3 has its moments where it's alright. They kind of get back to what made Serious Sam 1 fun. But then, like, towards the end of that game, it starts sucking again. And, like, the beginning of Serious Sam 3 also sucks. So there's just, like, this very brief period, like, in the middle of the game where it gets to be kind of tolerable for a little while. And then it just kind of peters back out again. So, Serious Sam 2, bad game. Don't try it. Don't give it the time of day. At least as far as I'm concerned. I had a conversation with someone on Twitter who said, like, it was their favorite Serious Sam game. And, fine, I respect your opinion. I don't agree with your opinion, but I do, like, respect it. So if you're out there and you like Serious Sam 2, sorry I don't like it, I guess. Sorry that I found, like, so many obvious problems with that game that do not fit what I think my view of a Serious Sam game should be. Last game is SRB2 Kart, Sonic Robo Blast 2 Kart. Which is a kart racer built on Sonic Robo Blast 2. And that sounds like it might be a nightmare, but it's actually, like, super fun, super good. I actually wrote, like, a big long blog post about that. So, really, if you want to go, like, hear about this game in depth, you can go just check out my blog. I'll probably drop a link in the show notes if you want to go click on that and read on that. But, it's... The thing that I think makes it the coolest is that it's kind of the Mugen or Mugen, whatever, that fighting game engine, Mugen. It's the Mugen of kart racers, which is to say it is highly customizable. You can make your own characters, you can make your own tracks, and already there's a slew of people that are like porting over characters and tracks from other games, which is kind of what you did with Mugen. And, like, the Mugen of kart racers was an idea that I had once many, many years ago, and I'm frankly glad to see someone follow through on it, because I don't think I would have ever gotten around to that idea. I don't even know where to begin on an idea like that. And SRB2 Kart is actually, like, again, you might think with this being, the SRB2 engine, the Doom Legacy engine or whatever, that it would be, like, kind of a nightmare, kind of ugly. But actually, like, the SRB2 engine has been getting, like, a lot of upgrades lately to support, like, proper sloped surfaces and all this other stuff, like 3D skyboxes. And I feel like in SRB2 Kart, like, all of that is finally paying, like, dividends. Like, it is actually, like, a really nice looking game. it does things that you wouldn't really expect that engine to be able to do, with as far as curved surfaces go, slope physics, things like that. It's like a modern 3D pixel art game, if that makes any sense. It looks super cool, I think. I really like the aesthetic of that game, and it makes me like really excited to see, once SRB2 itself proper finally gets updated, what that's going to look like. Because for like many, many years now, like 2 or 3 years, they've been promising like a super big total overhaul of Sonic Robo Blast 2. To add slopes to every level, to like refresh all of the graphics and refresh all of the music and all the bosses and everything else. And if this is what SRB2 kart looks like, I know that there are people that worked on the kart racing mod that are also part of the SRB2 team proper. So, there's a lot of shared DNA there, and hopefully that will translate over into Sonic Robo Blast 2 itself when they finally get that slopes update done and released and whatever else. Hopefully it'll be like super rad, because I am greatly invested in seeing where that game goes in the future. If you didn't know, I was once upon a time a texture artist for Sonic Robo Blast 2, and I didn't do as much work on that game as I probably should have. There were requests made of me that I never like completely finished, and it kind of makes me feel a little bit guilty to not have followed through like I should have. But, that's all in the past. That's all water under the bridge. There are a lot of my textures in Sonic Robo Blast 2 now. It's just most of the textures that are in Sonic Robo Blast 2 that I made came from a mod I was working on called Sonic Adventure SRB2, which is pretty self-explanatory as to what you think that sounds like. But all the textures I made for SASRB2 are in SRB2 proper now, so, I guess it all equals out. But Sonic Robo Blast 2 kart is excellent. My only real complaint is that it's multiplayer only. There currently is no real way to race offline. The only offline mode is like a time trial mode where you race against staff ghosts, and the staff ghosts might as well be impossible to catch. Because, those are guys that have, built and play tested those maps hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and it is impossible to catch them. And playing online, I think Sonic Robo Blast 2 kart, SRB2 kart, came out in like November-ish. So, it's been out for a few months, and I think the launch rush kind of died down. I think there's about 6 active servers right now, and finding anyone that's like actually playing on those servers is basically impossible. I have played online a couple of times on Tracker TD's server, and he lives in the UK, which means that like pings on that server are upwards of like 200, 250 milliseconds, which is not especially ideal, especially in a game like this where like control latency is actually tied to server latency. So if the server is lagging, then your controls are lagging, and that is a problem. Hopefully, there will be a proper offline mode some point in the future. Hopefully they will clean up their netcode a little bit. I'm not so sure they'll clean up their netcode, though. That sounds like something that would be difficult to do. That's one of those like deep embedded Doom engine sort of things. But what do I know? I've never seen that code. I don't know how any of it works. Maybe all this will be fixed in the future. But even just running time trials in that game is pretty fun. I definitely recommend, if you haven't, if you like kart racers, look up SRB2 Kart. It is a good time. It is a fun game. And it looks like weirdly pretty. It has a nice aesthetic that I approve of. Actually, I think that's it. In my notes here, I have notes about Pokemon Ultraviolet here at the end, but we talked about that earlier. So I think that's the end of the podcast, folks. This is a big, long, like 3-hour podcast. So, for those of you out there who like to hear me ramble, I sure did ramble a lot during this podcast. And yeah, hopefully I was coherent for some of it. Also, hopefully this podcast sounds all right. I'm going to be trying a different method to like equalize it and everything else. Very recently, I discovered how I can import my podcast audio into FL Studio, which is where I make my music. And what that means is that, I actually know like the equalizing tools, the mastering tools in FL Studio. So hopefully this podcast sounds pretty nice because that is where I know how to edit audio the best. Anyway, I'll see all you guys in February. Maybe it'll be earlier than the middle of February. Maybe it won't. Honestly, who cares? Who cares? Well, there we go, folks. There's your Freudian slip for this podcast. Who cares? Obviously you care and I care. It really stresses me out, actually, to not get these podcasts out sooner. It was one of those things where like I was thinking about it and it's like, oh crap. It's already like January 15th. What am I doing? I need to get the podcast out. So here we are. It'll probably be like the 18th or 19th, maybe even the 20th by the time this goes up on Patreon. But I'll see you guys when I see you. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully I wasn't too incoherent. Goodbye, folks. Happy 2019!